Good evening, folks. This is the Sunday show After Dark. My name is Eric, and with me tonight is Seth Andrews. Seth, how are you doing tonight?
I'm well. Just got off the tennis court. Turned out to be a nice day, and got my honeydews done. Fed the dogs. Got some decaf. So I mean, life is good.
Awesome.
I think this is our first tango here, right? First time we've ever done a show together.
It is, absolutely is. Since I started 2 years ago, I think you were basically my top three co-hosts I wanted to
You're very
do the
kind.
show with. So, yeah.
So,
finally, like a month ago, the schedule went up and had some blanks in it. And I talked to Arden. I said, "Hey, Arden, that 30th time slot there was Seth. Is that open?" And it's like, get that to me because I really want to get Seth. Get that off my list because it's something I wanted to do. So yeah,
Thank you.
Excited to be here.
It's cool. Well, forgive me, Eric, and maybe there's some viewers who don't know as well, but I spend so much time content creating. I don't always have all the skinny on the creators that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your channel? What do you do? What's your story? What'd you come out of? Just, introduce yourself to me at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And while I do that, folks in the audience, this is a live call-in show tonight. So we have, as far as I can see, open lines tonight. Stephanie Helms is our screener. So the number is right down below. You can look at 720-619-2288 or use the web link. And so, anyway, Seth and I will just kind of shoot the shit until we get some more people to come in. To answer your question, Seth, I am a former Jehovah's Witness, ex-Jehovah's Witness. I had the misfortune of being born into a Jehovah's Witness family. Jehovah's Witnesses, very socially insulated, very cult-like religious organization, relatively small compared to other, Christian denominations out there. They're only about 8 million people today. Anyway, I broke out in my mid-20s. I'm 43 now, so I broke out in my mid-20s almost 20 years ago now. And anyway, went through the deconversion process. And then finally, a couple years ago, I started a content creation channel called Skeptics and Scoundrels here on YouTube. Made a couple videos. And before I knew it, I was talking to Jimmy and I found myself here.
That's
cool. It's kind of
where it's funny. From. I used to think of the Jehovah's Witnesses much in the way that I saw the Mormons. And we had Mormons in our lives. They were some of the nicest, sweetest, kindest, most precious people that I know. But as far as the organization itself, the structure, the doctrines, I used to think JWs were just like happy, weird people. Like, it's totally benign and they just do some odd stuff, but it's kind of a weird offshoot of Christianity. And then, of course, you get into the reality of it and it knocked my socks off. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe how insidious there's a dark underbelly to JW, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. The thing with Jehovah's Witnesses is their number one priority is officially preaching the good news of the kingdom. In order to do that, they think that their reputation, the organization, the leadership of the organization, thinks of the reputation of the organization itself is God's representation on earth, because obviously the Jehovah's Witnesses are the only true organization chosen by God. And obviously they're the only ones preaching this good news, so that the way that they're perceived by the public is critical to them and getting this message across. So they teach followers that, hey, even if you don't feel like it, put a smile on your face. Don't do anything to bring reproach upon the organization's name, because by doing so, you'll be bringing reproach upon Jehovah's name. So you get this really weird toxic system of denying how you're actually feeling, ignoring negative emotions, putting on a happy, smiling face, especially for the public. And that breeds a lot of dysfunction, especially within like certain families. I've seen so many dysfunctional Jehovah's Witness families who on the outside, they look like they're happy preachers doing the good work and waiting for Armageddon to come, when internally lots of issues, marital problems, problems between fathers and children and mothers and daughters. And it's just terrible, because it's like I said, it's a cult. You're shoving aside your genuine self to put on this facade for the sake of appearances. So yeah, that's exactly what we see there, because on the outside you'll see, yeah, okay, they're kind of like Mormons. They're, they're happy and they're friendly and they're peaceful people and they're honest, and but no, actually internally they're humans just like anybody else. And on top of that, they're humans suppressing who they actually are. So that makes it even worse,
Just in
Yeah.
San Antonio, I was the officiant for Daniel Earl's wedding. He and Lauren got married and asked me to be. They didn't want a preacher, so they had me be the officiant. That's objectively Dan, who is an activist and a street
Oh, okay, yeah.
epistemologist and a lovely guy. So I was the officiant down there in San Antonio. I had the morning off, and I went to the Alamo. I thought, well, I'm not going to sit in this hotel for 6 hours for an afternoon wedding. So I'm 10 minutes from the Alamo. So I went down there. And beyond the fact that I got the overall impression that this history was the history being shown in the tours was written by white people. Definitely got kind of a white vibe on that one, because everybody was a little too heroic. And they kind of, I don't know, it was one of those things. But as I was walking out, there was a sort of corridor to a downtown street, and there were two women, and they had a little stand, and they were Jehovah's Witnesses, and they had pamphlets, brochures, and they were like, ask us about the Jehovah's Witnesses. I forgot what the line was. And I almost stopped. I almost stopped and had a conversation. I thought, no, come on, let's just go. When those people are out there, like if you had been that person, are you in hell? Are you just like, shit, I'm doing this because I've got to do it, because my church tells me to do it. Yeah. God, may let this be over with. Or were you thinking, yay, I get to share the good news?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because back when I left, they actually hadn't started that corner preaching yet. It was strictly door-to-door preaching, which was, I think, even worse, because at least the cart preachers, they just get to sit there and they passively wait for people to approach them, and then they will engage a conversation there. Whereas in door-to-door, you're going house to house and disturbing people's mornings, afternoons, their routines. Me being a kid, back when I was really young, I was like, man, I really hope a school friend doesn't live here, or something like that. Very stressful. But yeah, for the most part, I never really enjoyed the preaching work all that much. I had
Did you ever feel unsafe though? I mean, you're knocking on a door, and some dude comes out who's looks dangerous and irritated. I mean, did you ever worry that someone's going to kick your ass, kind of thing?
Yeah. I've heard stories, but I've never had like an encounter myself. The worst thing I had were, I've had people open the door naked. I've had people open the door and they're obviously on some type of drug, and naked, or they're on a drug and they're telling me that they're Jesus, and you can just kind of see it in their eyes that they got like the crazy in there.
Awesome.
I got a bunch of stories like that, but nothing that's ever like, approached like, okay, I'm in danger, I need to get out of here. I've definitely had courses of door-to-door preaching in really rough neighborhoods. But for the most part, thankfully I was never actually like, I think, in any real.
What's that old Stephen Wright joke? He's in the Jehovah's Witness protection program. You knock on the door and tell them you're somebody else. I always thought that was kind of a clever line, but
yeah.
One more JW question while we're waiting, because I'm just curious, but we're waiting for the switchboard to populate. Theist, welcome. Atheist, I'll take anybody who has got a good question or comment. Right, I'm here for conversation. So explain the 144,000 to me. Is it that only 144,000 people actually get to go to heaven, and everybody else just kind of gets hosed? It's like heaven light or something?
Close, yeah. So the Jehovah's Witnesses, they separate those who survive Armageddon into two groups: the little flock, which is the 144,000, and then the other group is the great crowd, which is innumerable. We don't know how many people there are in it. The 144,000, that's derived from Revelation, talking about the 12 tribes of Israel and how from each of the 12 tribes, 12,000 people were chosen. Witnesses interpret that as those are God's anointed, Jehovah's anointed priests and kings to co-rule with Jesus up in heaven upon their death. So if Jehovah's Witness who thinks that they're one of those number, when they die, they think they're going to go to heaven. They're going to rule as a king and priest or whatever next to Jesus for the 1,000 years after Armageddon happens. Everyone else doesn't necessarily get hosed, but they're tasked with rebuilding a post-Armageddon earth back into a paradise, and they're going to live forever on paradise earth, doing whatever you do for forever on earth. So that's kind of what they do. They have this Armageddon doctrine going to happen any day now. Jehovah's going to destroy all the wicked and destroy all the wicked governments and the systems of the world. And then the survivors will live on the earth, and all the anointed will be whisked away up into heaven, either on their death or at Armageddon to co-rule with Jesus. And that's what they believe. So
I was talking about the Christian notion of heaven, which makes no sense on a number of levels. Mm-hmm. But, Jesus through the Bible, he's telling the rich guy, sell your stuff, right? Get rid of your stuff and follow me, right? Donate the proceeds to the poor because money's not important. The love of money is the root of all evil. Mm-hmm. It is easier for a man to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And I believe the eye of the needle doesn't mean an actual eye of a needle, but it meant an entrance through like a village, a castle wall, that's a whole other conversation. But the whole idea is eschew material possessions. It's the heart that matters. Then you die. And it's all about mansions and crowns and jewels and streets of gold and pearly gates. And it's all about the bling. I'm like, well, hang on just a second. Is it about stuff like shiny gold and pearls and big homes and bling, or was it always about the heart? I just don't understand how it can be wrong on this planet and be then something we want, and then we want it to be bigger and better and brighter and shinier in the afterlife. To me, that seemed a contradiction. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, the book of Revelation has some vivid depictions of like the luxuries of heaven, like the cornerstones or the corner gates of heaven and what they're made out of, and it's all precious jewels, and it's kind of stuff that you would expect out of mythological legend. Witnesses, unlike the Mormons, because Mormons have like their own university and they encourage their followers, hey, become educated, get good jobs, have children, educate them, get them to good jobs, because then they get 10% tithe off of all that. Like, they got the right idea when it comes to finances, the Mormons. The Witnesses, on the other hand, they're basically like, well, the world's going to end any day now. There's no reason to become a lawyer or a doctor. You're not going to need lawyers and doctors in post-Armageddon new system. Just do what you need to do to get by, which is usually a lot of blue-collar jobs, which nothing wrong with that. But if you're limiting a whole group of people to just blue-collar jobs, the wealth level will be fairly low, generally, compared to like I said, the Mormons. So they're gonna you have lots of people just trying to make ends meet. And I was the same way back in my 20s. I did window washing, I did cleaning, I eventually got into construction, and I became a tile setter and a hardwood floor installer, did showers and such. And only after, and I guess another thing there too is, like, since they discourage all those higher paying jobs, they basically shun those who go to college. If you go to college, you're going to have problems in the congregation. The elders will be on your case. They'll try to get you out of it. Even when I left and I decided to go to college, and I didn't tell my family that I was no longer a Jehovah's Witness, I just kind of, faded. I had active resistance in my family about me going to college and getting my computer science degree. It's like they have relatively low wealth and low standards of living. Many of them struggle because they are told, don't bother storing up treasures on earth, because you want to store up treasures in heaven, and you do that by preaching, not by getting a job and paying for your stuff. So it's pretty messed up.
The Mormon church is wired into a lot of businesses. It's funny, when you get into church finances, it's not even a blurring of the line. In many ways, the Mormon church is a business. So, they own massive shopping malls and retail centers and corporations and all these other things. And so they've got their fingers in a lot of financial pies that are not necessarily religious, but they play the religion card when it's convenient for tax purposes or tax shelter purposes. So they're both church and business. It's a little bit like what Kim Ham did with the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, right? It's a $120 million tourist attraction when he wants state funds and tax breaks, but it's a church when he wants to be a 501c3 and avoid paying taxes. It's really convenient. I find religion's able to play the business ministry cards whenever they want to, honestly, and they're pretty shaky about it. So anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
It's very weird when you get into churches trying to skirt tax laws, because I've heard all kinds of stories about the Ark Encounter doing really shady stuff with their books to get around certain taxes. I think there was one, I might not be recalling correctly, but the way that they count their attendance is done by tickets. And so they used to, or they still do, I don't quite remember, they used to sell individual tickets to individual people. But then they switched over to the system of, if you have a family, you just buy one ticket and you bring the entire family in. So on their books, it's one ticket, even though you just brought in like 5 or 6 people. And so what that allowed them to do was basically lower their tax burden when it came to, I think, the local counties, like firefighting taxes or something like that. Like they didn't want to pay as much into that system to help, fight fires in the area, like pay for trucks and stations and such. So they started kind of massaging their books and lowering the ticket count by doing this like family ticket system and basically not recording at what their actual attendance was, in order to skirt around that. And I've heard of other stories like this too. And it's like, yeah, it's like if God is really blessing you and God is really on your side, would it be fine to pay whatever taxes you owe, and just like God will just simply handle it? I mean, the mountains and the gold and the riches belong to Him, don't they, Christians? Like, can't God just open up a mountain and boof, all this gold comes out, and hey, that's all yours, Ark Encounter, everything you need to pay your taxes and keep the area safe.
Matt Dillahunty and I toured the Ark Encounter together. Now, I've toured both the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter, and I did profile videos on both. I could feel the brain cells dying as I was walking from room to room in those exhibits. But the Ark Encounter, first of all, there's already freaking wood damage from the weather on the exterior of the Ark. Secondly, it's not an Ark. It's an Ark facade on one side, and it's a business office on the other. The back half is buildings. If you go inside, there's some impressive woodwork, but there's also just crazy stuff. Velociraptors in cages. And they're talking about velociraptors just hanging out with humankind. And there's a lot of reading material. I mean, the last half of the tour we thought was just boring because you're just supposed to go and read on the walls about God's judgment. There's a great poster that says, if something along the lines of people will doubt Noah's Ark, then they might doubt the whole Bible. And Matt and I took a photo with that. And we're like, yeah, that's actually pretty reasonable. Yeah. If we doubt Noah's Ark, there may be a whole lot of other shit in there that ain't true. Maybe we should really engage the doubt mechanisms in our brain, critical thinking, those types of deals. But I would watch these little parades of duckling homeschool children and their charges, and they were trying to, or guardians rather. And my heart broke for them because I thought, well, for them, they are being hamstrung potentially for the rest of their life. They're being brainwashed to believe unbelievable things. And as a young child, if the adult you trust says, oh, yes, there were dinosaurs on the Ark, and you begin to accept that, I'm reminded of that article, a survey that came out years ago that children who are indoctrinated into fundamentalist religion with a lot of supernatural stuff in it, when they grow up, they often have a harder time discerning the real from the fake. They're much more prey to conspiracy theories and bad ideas, false narratives. And so, when people ask, well, what's your problem? Why can't people become religious on their own terms? Not like, well, they have the right to be. But I think that religious claims themselves do need to be challenged because there are a lot of kids who are indoctrinated into religion, and it hamstrings them and makes them less able to navigate the rest of their lives. And I think kids have a right to be able to determine for themselves, to be taught how to think instead of what to think. And that's one of the many reasons that that we do what we do. Anyway, I'm just babbling here.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and that's exactly what I use too. Is these kids, those who grow up in this environment, they are hamstrung. Like they're crippled going forward, even after they break out. Like when I got out, when I was in my 20s, I realized I had a lot of catching up to do, and I spent 10 years just working my ass off with getting my career together, studying up on things that I had missed out on or things that I ignored when I was young because, hey, evolution's not true. Hey, the universe is not, I'm sorry, the earth is not, over 6,000 years old and all these things. So yeah, it's just recognizing that I had to basically take the next 10 years of my life, even after I freed myself, essentially playing catch up and doing overtime in school, doing overtime in my studies and just learning up on things. and it was a fun experience. Like I love learning, but it feels like I not only lost the first 25 years of my life to that, but then I also lost even more time after that recovering from it.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine individuals who get out, when they're 40, 50 and go, what do I do now?
Oh
Like
shit! I
it
was
totally,
30, what, 7 when I first cracked a Carl Sagan book. Right, I'm
yeah,
37, and
yeah,
before I started to take real classes and begin to learn the science of evolution, and I felt like, where have I been? How much catch
hmm
up do I'm still catching up?
yeah.
It's
I
been
I still am.
it's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
almost 20
I
years.
I
I
by no means am
use
saying I'm by no means saying I caught up. I'm just saying I'm still working at it. I feel like I'm in a much better place now than I was, 10, 15 years ago when I
I
deconverted.
knew a woman who escaped the Brudenhofer cult, and they didn't even have televisions. And
Yeah.
so she's 18 years old. She busts out. She's sleeping on somebody's couch. She's watching Friends on television. Like, this is another universe. This is like she landed on a
Yeah.
foreign planet. And she said that one of the ways that she tried to introduce herself to the world outside of her pod was to watch
Mhm.
Friends. And then she would watch the show on that was after, just listening. How do people talk? What's this about? What are the fashions? Who are the celebrity? She began to
Mhm.
slowly begin to introduce herself to a world that she never knew existed. And I'm sure that journey continues even 20 some years later. I think
Mhm.
she's in her late 30s now. But
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons that we do what we do. We want to try to encourage other people that
Yes.
there may be better ideas out there. And if you come up
Yes.
with an idea that is better than the ones we hold, we would definitely like to hear it, and we'd like to hear it presented here on the show. So we're all yours.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, hey, that was a great conversation. I mean, it's good getting to know you and like basically
You
touching
too.
base and seeing where each of us are coming from. I wanted to get more into like exactly what your history is. I know bits and pieces about it. I know you were. We'll get into a little bit later, but I know a few details about it. Perhaps when we get a lull between the calls, I'll try
Sure.
to. We'll talk a little bit about your history. So we do have a couple calls in the lines. We'll bring one up here in a moment. But again, folks in the audience, we prioritize theists. Atheists are welcome as well, but if you're a theist and an atheist in the chat or in the waiting room, we're going to prioritize a theist. So nothing personal. Numbers at the bottom there, and we'll go ahead and bring up our first guest. We have Alfred. Pronouns are he, him in Texas. Alfred's a theist, and he would like to talk about God gene, the God gene. Alfred, how you doing?
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
So I just wanted to start by saying that there are some of us Christians who listen to shows like this, and we've heard your arguments against the existence of God, and I think you guys have a point with the whole we can't prove God exists, at least not as he's traditionally defined, omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much evidence for it, and we wish we had more evidence. We just don't. And there's
Right.
still some of us, we just can't help ourselves. We keep coming back to it, like coming back to the church, the Bible, Jesus, God, because for many of us, it's like, what else is there out there? What's there to live for? And I'm wondering what you make out of that. If you have any thoughts about it.
Sure. So just to kind of address a couple of things you mentioned. For the most part, atheists don't directly argue against the existence of a God. You did make the distinction of, hey, the triomni God, where, hey, we can take a look at the triomni God or the God of classical theism and go, okay, yeah, he has these three omni traits. But then we look at the world we have today and we're like, wait a minute, there's a bit of a contradiction here. So
Yeah.
in that case, yeah, we can kind of argue against the existence of that God. But generally, for any general theism type, like let's say like a deistic God, we don't argue against that because it's, as you mentioned, there's not much evidence for it, which is for us good enough reason to not believe it to begin with.
Yep.
But also, these gods tend to be unfalsifiable. There is no way to argue against it. But when you're asking us like, what is there to live for, and what do we think about that? Um, I can give you all kinds of things that I live for. I'm not a believer. I believe in zero gods, and I actively believe against, like, I believe that the Christian God does not exist. I see too many contradictions and problems there. But despite that, I have lots to live for. I have myself. I have the things to experience in life. I have my family. I have my dogs. I have my friends. I have foods and countries that I want to experience for their first time. I have lots to live for. Do you think that those desires and what I want to do with my life is somehow reduced or invalidated unless there's some deity giving me those desires?
No, not at all.
Okay. And then
I'm just
also, do you
saying
think
that
that,
for
and then my follow-up question, my follow-up question would be also, do you think that those wants and desires and the things I want to do with my life is somehow reduced because it'll be temporary?
to an extent, yes. And just to return to your answer, I mean, candidly, it sounds nice, and then for some of us, we start to think about it, and it's like it's talk like that that makes some of us wonder what gives an atheist the will to live, because it's just like, wow, that's it. For some of us, that's 2 steps away from slitting our wrist. You know, oh, my family, oh, the world, the
See,
collect. You know, like that is
that's funny. That's funny because actually I don't see it that way at all. Like when
sure.
I left religion, I didn't say, "Oh, I'm now 2 steps away from slitting my wrist." I felt not one step closer to unaliving myself, like at all. So why do you think there's a disconnect there? Why do you think that, but I didn't? And actually, and I can tell you as a person who's gone through it, I still don't feel it. I've never felt it. I've never felt that, hey, without some deity to back me up or some deity to tell me what's right and wrong or what my purpose in life is, or the fact that my enjoyment of life is going to be temporary, I have never felt that somehow diminished my life and my experiences. In fact, it enhanced it. Because if you think about it, what makes something precious? It's rarity. Gold is precious because gold is rare. Rocks are not precious because rocks are common. And if the days and time that I have left is limited, then their value increases to me. I want to experience more. I want to go out and do things. I don't want to just sit on my hands and say, hey, I'll do this tomorrow. No, I want to do this now because I want to do something else tomorrow because I have limited time. So you and I seem to have polar opposite views about this. And I'm the one that's gone through the process. You haven't, as far as I know. Why do you think that is?
Well, I was going to get to my point, and that might be
Sure.
the God gene. Like some of us might be hardwired. Like none of this makes sense without a God. And I'm just wondering what you might think of the God gene. I'm not a biologist, and I don't really have a
Sure.
background in evolution. I think there might be something to it, and I can't speak specifically about it in the same way like when Democritus talked about the atom, he didn't know how many different kinds of atoms there were, how small they were, but he was onto something, you know. And we're still kind of, our understanding of genetics it's in its infancy, and I'm just wondering if you think there might be something to the God gene.
I would like to jump in here if I may.
Go right ahead.
Dr. John Wathy is a computational neuroscientist who has written about this. He has a book called The Illusion of God's Presence. It is a thick book. Better move is probably to listen to the conversation that he and I had on a podcast 7-8 years ago. It's just called, you can just Google or YouTube or podcast search Seth Andrews, John Wathy, Wathy, The Illusion of God's Presence. But he talks about how we are evolved to, when we are infants, to rely as helpless creatures on a parental figure. And there are stimuli that religions provide that activate some of those things in our brain that cause us to respond to the idea of a spiritual guardian, a heavenly father. I mean, and a lot of this is explained evolutionarily. If you were to invoke a God gene, you're going to have to show me a God gene. To say, what about the God gene? Hang on, I'm going to finish this sentence. To say that there may be a God gene or there's a God gene, I'm not a biologist, I don't know, but there's a lot we don't know, so it may be there. That doesn't really help us. If you want to show me a God gene, what is that? how would we recognize it, and what would its function be?
Sure. And I was just joking earlier. So to return to my analogy, like in first century Greece or whenever it was, there was the atomists, and then there were I think, Heraclitus and his bunch. They were like, no, there's no atoms, there's no points, it's all just flux. And imagine someone telling Democritus, well, it's a nice idea and everything, but until you can actually show me an atom, this really isn't of any use to us. Like that's how I kind of feel with you saying that, just a little.
And he would have been justified doing that. Yeah, it makes sense, but he would have been justified in saying that, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the time to believe something is when you have the evidence to support it. So you could potentially put forward a claim that is true, that is 100% true. If you want to go like to say it's just a fact. But if you have zero evidence to show that it is, and it is just simply a blind assertion, then there is no justification to accept it, despite it eventually being true.
Or am I also hearing an expectation that, when they experiment more, they may find it? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, and to return, it's not a blind assertion. We just came to an impasse where, like, you said that, hey, if there is no God, it's still a wonderful world. And there's a big disconnect between you and me. Like, for me, it's like, what's the point? I mean, what's the point? So maybe I have the God gene and you don't,
Well, hang on.
It's not a blind assertion.
If I may, that's a whole different conversation about what we value, about whether or not something needs to be eternal to be worth doing. If there was no deity, and let's say that knowledge arrived tomorrow, and you were confronted with it, it has been debunked. We know that even the idea of the deistic cosmic other out there, we know it's wrong. Let's say you stumbled upon that, or it was presented to you tomorrow. You wouldn't feel the merit of loving who you love, of going out and making memories and achieving goals, and just enjoying the warm summer sun or the spring sun, to be able to maximize these temporary moments. Somehow those moments would all be cheated. They would be cheated of their merit. You would be cheated of enjoying them because they weren't going to last forever. I'm not sure I understand why that is.
Sure. If I may, so one point that's often made on this program is, there might come a day when the sun swallows the earth, all gone, humanity just gone, no trace left of it.
No, there will come a day in about 5 billion years when that happens.
Well, we have some time, limited time and resources to figure out something to do about it, right? I mean, we're not all just going to camp out here, hopefully, right?
Yeah, 5 billion years is a long time. Chances are, if we don't self-annihilate through some other means, we will get ourselves off this planet.
It's a long time. It's also a quite involved problem. Even if we will full-scale nuclear war, but I'm digressing. I'm sorry. So,
yeah, you broke up there a little bit.
We didn't hear the last 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Sure. I said that I'm not as optimistic as you are. Yes, 5 billion years is a long time to figure out a way to get off this. It's a very involved project. So,
Alfred,
yes.
Hang on. The only reason I'm interrupting you is because I'm still back at the question I asked a minute ago, and I'm insanely curious. Okay. If you were presented with some kind of a concrete data set that proved that there are no gods anywhere, what would prevent you from enjoying being alive in those moments anyway?
I'm sorry, you cut out. Can you say it again?
If there was no evidence for any gods and you were presented with that, what would prevent you from being able to live a life where you loved people and they loved you, and you made memories and you set goals and you just sucked the marrow out of every moment? What would prevent that?
Well, again, I probably would. It would just feel, I don't know.
No, you said you would slit your wrists, and that's not what you're saying now.
No, I didn't say I would. I said that's 2 steps away from it.
Okay, you'll be 2 steps away from suicide, which is a weird thing to say if you were going to embrace the moments in a temporary and finite life. No gods exist, but you still have a life to live. What would prevent you from living that life with some pleasure and purpose?
Well, the purpose would be self-generated. It would be constructed by me.
Yes, it would, and that's amazing. What's wrong with that?
How would that at all be lower value than something else giving you that purpose? Wouldn't self-generated purpose be better than something just handed to you and forced on you?
It's an interesting thought, and I don't have a ready-made answer. If I may ask a question, so I'll put my atheist hat on for a second. There's no God, okay? So we have 2 routes. One is, again, and I was getting to this earlier. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
One is that the sun swallows up the earth. All of humanity is obliterated. There's no trace of anything that happened. And the second scenario is somehow we get off the planet, or some of us do, and there's some record of what happened, and humanity goes and lives on, evolving and whatever, and into the future with no, I don't want to say forever, but there's no
end in sight. Is that a fair way to say it?
Correct. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Were you getting to a question?
Connection's been a little spotty. It's possible he's been drawn into the void. The sun has absorbed him, and he is now literally in the flames of. Hello, is he there?
Alfred, you there?
Hello.
Yeah.
So in the second scenario, can you hear me?
Okay.
In the second scenario, where we find a way past 5 billion years with no end in sight, somehow we have developed or embraced a way to live on, and
yes, I would feel much more comfortable in the second scenario, and I would feel that my life had more meaning. Would you feel any different knowing that in the future humanity's going to be wiped out?
I think his question is, Alfred, you're breaking up again, but I think your question is if the end of humanity was just an unknown, indeterminate date in the future, and we have no idea when it's going to happen, as opposed to 5 billion years from now, when the sun expands, and if we don't get off this rock, we're gone. Would that somehow make us feel better about it? I don't think so. Like you should bring it down in more realistic terms and say, hey, if there's a meteor going to hit the Earth tomorrow, and we all have 24 hours to live, would I feel better about existence now than if I would without that meteor coming? I don't know, maybe, but my feelings don't affect what reality is. And if that meteor is coming, that meteor is coming. And besides, on a universal scale, you can get off this planet in 5 billion years to avoid the sun engulfing it, but then you still have the problem with the heat death of the universe. Entropy will eventually kill everything here. And that's universe wide, unless you could find a way to jump to a hypothetical parallel universe where entropy is not as far progressed. Like, you still have that same problem.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll be a fatalist with you for a moment. We are, as a species, doomed. We're eventually not going to be here, just like everything else in the universe, according to our current understanding of science. So whether it's tomorrow or 5 billion years from now or 50 billion years from now or 50 trillion years from now, it doesn't really matter, because objectively, we don't think a God is giving us any type of purpose. We think that purpose comes from us, and we have to use the time we have effectively and in a way that gives us in a way that's worth living. And that's going to be different from person to person. we have no choice but to do that because it's the only path forward, no matter what. Let me ask you this. Hopefully, let me ask you this. Were you raised in a religious household? Like, were you born into Christianity or some Christian or theist denomination?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to guess from birth, from infanthood, you were told that there's a God that loves you. He has a purpose for you.
Yes.
You're destined for heaven if you're a good person. Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's say instead of being born into a family that told you those things, you were born into a family that told you, hey, Alfred, ever since you were a little kid and throughout your teenage years, all the way up until you're 18, Alfred, we have a bank account for you and it has $100 million in it just for you. And it'll unlock when you're 18. And in your entire life, you're told that you have $100 million in the bank and it's waiting for you once you turn 18. So as you grow up, you're getting anticipation for what you can do with this money. You got dreams and you got all kinds of plans for what you want to do with this money. But then finally, when 18 hits, you're finally told, actually, there is no bank account with $100 million inside of it. And that's the case. There is actually no bank account. It was a fabrication or it was a lie or whatever you want to say. But you thought it was there for 18 years and now it's not. Would that reduce your will to live?
That's a good question. Well, I'd feel kind of crestfallen.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
But would you say to yourself, when you're 18 years and 1 day old and you've realized that the bank account is not there, would you say to yourself, well, damn it, now I'm 2 steps away from slitting my wrists? Would you say that?
No.
Yeah. And here's the thing too, like when I stopped believing, because I was born in a Christian religion. I was told, as I mentioned earlier with Seth early in the show, I was told and I believed with my whole heart that once God kills all the bad people on earth, that I am going to live forever on a new paradise earth. I was given eternity. I was given perfect health. I would be helping to rebuild the earth into a garden and rebuild society. And then one day I realized, wait a minute, that was all a lie. And instead of,
I don't know if it was a lie.
Well, I'm pretty sure it conflicts with your theology because JWs are pretty unique unless you happen to be a JW or something. But I concluded that's a lie. It's not supported by evidence. And in fact, I have really good evidence that Jehovah's Witnesses are not the true religion on earth. I came to that realization. I was no closer to unaliving myself than I was before I stopped believing. Same thing that if it was a money situation, $100 million, I wouldn't be. It would be a bummer. Like I was bummed out when I stopped believing in all this stuff. Hey, I'm going to miss out on all these things. But hey, I still have my whole life ahead of myself. I have things I need to do. And as I mentioned earlier, I got my ass into gear and I started doing things because I realized I didn't have eternity. And I would do the same thing with the money. I would say, okay, well, that's a bummer, but I can't just stop living. I got things to do. And I would get up and get moving. So why is it the case that if you don't have some objective purpose given to you by a deity, that you would make that switch in your mentality and your outlook?
I'll have to think about it more.
Fair enough. I think I think this is and I really enjoy this conversation, Alfred, and we're going to let you go here in a moment. But I hope you do think about that and think about why is it that you feel this way? Because like I mentioned earlier, that's kind of why I pointed out earlier, I've gone through this and I can tell you from my perspective, from my experience, that I did not go through this shift, this negative shift in outlook. In fact, my outlook became more positive because I realized that the blindfold came off and the shackles came off my hands and I got things to do, stuff I never dreamed about doing. I got things to do. Like that's what happened to me. And your experience might be different. Another deconvert's experience might be different. But thinking that without actually having going through it yourself, that you think you would be closer to suicide if you didn't have this objective thing. Yeah, really think about why you're feeling that way. And maybe also think about the money analogy, because just for a moment, pretend that your religion is false and that your beliefs are false. Just for a moment, pretend. and ask yourself, how is that any different from that $1 million in the bank or that $100 million in the bank? How would that change things? Like, would you actually do that, or would you get your butt in gear and start living your life to the fullest? But anyway, that's probably all I got to say about that. Seth, you want to any closing comments for Alfred?
No, I think that's a good way to close the call. Alfred, thanks for your time very much.
Yeah,
May
Alfred?
I say something? I don't know if the heat death of the universe is a known yet. I've looked into it.
I said according to kind of known physics, but yeah, we don't really know whether that's the case or not.
Yeah. Okay.
Alfred, here's my thing.
Yeah.
All of it, we're talking about billions upon billions upon billions of years. We are speaking of a scenario that is so abstract that it has absolutely no relation to our everyday lives today. And I want to see us talk about living in the here and now, not what humankind might have evolved to be or what planet we might be living on when the sun ultimately envelops the earth in 5 billion years. I think all of this it's academic. It's fun to talk about maybe at some really nerdy parties, but I don't think it's really applicable as far as whether or not we're going to decide if life has meaning for us, because whether we like it or not, our physical bodies will be over in a matter of decades, and that's it. Whether or not there is a heaven, our physical earthly bodies are done. So we can talk about the heat death of the universe, but it doesn't really matter because we're finite, at least on this earth, finite beings. And I'd like to root us there in maybe future conversations. Okay, Alfred?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for calling. I want to throw out something that I've mentioned in shows past, and for those who have heard me say this over and over again, I must beg your indulgence or even forgiveness. But I was like you. When I believed that I would live forever and go to heaven, I was more afraid of death than when I didn't believe in heaven. It was weird because you'd think the opposite would be true.
Yeah.
It added an urgency to the day. And the temporary nature of this existence really did add real flavor, real urgency. And I like to say it this way. You know, when you go out and eat a delicious meal, that meal has a final bite. But it doesn't mean you don't go out and enjoy the meal. If your favorite song comes on and you listen to it and enjoy it and just get enveloped by the sound, there is a final note. Was that sound not worth enjoying? If you love someone and they're taken from you early, they die of cancer, or they're in a car wreck, or maybe they were just elderly and died of natural causes, and you lost them, and that love was temporary, why would that love still not be precious and worth feeling and having and embracing? This idea that something must be eternal to give meaning is just so backward and so wrong-headed. We are creatures of the here and now, alive on this planet. We must make the most of the moments. And I think generating our own sense of purpose, which fundy religions say is egotistical and sinful. No. Generating our own sense of purpose is actually a gift that we give to ourselves every single day of our lives. It's not just good. I think it's necessary. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, that it's necessary. It's a component of what drives us forward, is that self-determination. And and I think a lot of it comes down to also is that for some reason individuals think that objective is better, greater than subjective. How you get objective meaning from a God, I don't know, because it's kind of a contradiction in terms. But even, let's say for a moment, you could get objective meaning, objective purpose from a God. How is that better than your own? Sure, he's more stronger than you and he can flick your head off if he wants to, but that doesn't make his purpose for you better. It's one of those things like what is the balancing factor there, or the unbalancing factor rather. And I've never heard a good answer for that. Why is an objectively given purpose better than the one you give yourself? Anyway, maybe a Christian will have the answer to that tonight. But let's get under our next call here. We have 2 theists. I'll get the theist that's been waiting the longest. We have DeAndre. DeAndre is from Los Angeles. DeAndre's a theist. Question is, why is it not acceptable to believe in a God when at this point we don't know what happened before the universe formed? So DeAndre, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right. You want to clarify your question? Because it just sounds like you're saying, why is it not acceptable to just make random claims about stuff we don't know about? That's kind of how I parse a sentence, but I want to be generous and let you explain it.
Okay. I think of it kind of like this. There are a lot of theories about what happened before the Big Bang, such as the universe never had a beginning and it's eternal, or some outside source, and there's no real evidence for those. So why is believing in a God or gods different?
Well, I would probably make a correction there. I wouldn't say there's no evidence for those hypotheses. There is some evidence for all of them. The fact is that we don't have enough evidence to conclusively pick one of them. But and all these things in science are proposed as hypotheticals, and some of them are actually graduated to theories because they do support what we see in the universe and they support the mathematics. But there can be multiple theories all competing to explain what actually happened there. So we do have evidence for it. We reject the God because there's no evidence for that God. At least no good evidence.
Okay, and you wouldn't consider personal experience or personal sight good evidence, would you?
Would you?
Yeah.
I mean, kind of. If the person I know is trustworthy and doesn't have any history of mental issues, and I know is genuinely a well-learned person and likes to find the truth out about things, I guess I tend to believe them more than not.
Okay, well, I'm leading you in. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, so go ahead, Seth. You're asking.
I'm leading you down a road for a reason. What does your personal experience tell you about God? Who is that God?
For me, I'm not sure. Personally, for me, I don't know if I ever saw just one God, but I have personal experiences, I feel, with multiple gods.
Okay, all right. So let's say you're at a table with two other people. One is a Christian, one's a devout Muslim. And they say that, well, there's the Christian God, the biblical God, is actually the cosmic creator and the originator of all things. That universe came from Yahweh. And then the Islam proponent said, no, a personal experience told me that it was Allah who actually caused it all to spring into existence. I know this with all my heart. Both of these apologists, coming from different perspectives, different religions, pitching different gods, say they just know because they had a personal experience than that God told them. Would you accept either of those claims at face value based on their personal testimony if you found them trustworthy about other things?
Can you repeat the last sentence? You kind of broke up there for me.
You've got two people with personal experiences, and they each have a different God explanation for the universe. But they're reliable and trustworthy, and they're smart, and they're not addled mentally at all, and they seem like really together, centered people. One just happens to be a Christian God person. The other is an Islamic God person. They both are speaking to their personal experience. God told me so. Would that personal experience from either one or both impress you? Would you take their word for it?
That's a good point. I'm in that specific situation. I wouldn't be too sure. I'd probably ask more questions about their personal experience, see what exactly happened, I guess.
I think questions are important. I mean, I would have that conversation, but we're still in the arena of the anecdotal, right? Someone's just saying it happened to me. You don't know what's happening under the skin. You don't know brain chemistry. You don't know bias. You don't know agendas. You aren't working with evidence. You're working with anecdotes. And the plural of anecdote is not evidence. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eric. I'll sit back and watch the magic on your end for a few. Go ahead.
No, you were right on there. And I guess and just to go into what Seth was saying there, DeAndre, like the person you're describing, you said that this person, you trust this person, you have no reason not to trust this person, and you have no evidence of a history of any type of mental episodes or mental illness. And I guess my two questions to you would be, can a person you trust be wrong about something, just genuinely wrong?
Of course I can.
Okay. Can a person without a history of mental illness or mental episodes have a mental episode?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're appealing to an anecdote, as what Seth was bringing out, when you're appealing to an anecdote, those problems are inescapable. You can have a person that you just implicitly trust. You've known them your entire life. You know that they want the best for you, and you can have them all of a sudden one day tell you, "Hey, I met Allah, or I met Vishnu, or I met Xenu, or I met the fairy that lives in my tree in the backyard." And these questions are inescapable when you're dealing with that. What is going on in this person's mind? And when it comes to things like spectacular things like meeting a god or meeting a spirit or something insane like that, those are, to me, are defeaters for the proposition, because without any type of evidence that can be shown to others, repeated, demonstrated outside of just the verbal recollection of some past experience, this is insufficient evidence to adopt these claims. Like you can have a Muslim friend that you've trusted your entire life, and all of a sudden they're telling you, "Hey, Allah talked to me last night." Like, would you believe that?
Initially, I wouldn't be sure. I'd ask him if he was like drinking last night, doing any type of drugs, probably.
He could answer no to all. He could answer no to all those things. I was just having a normal night, and I met Allah.
Okay.
What questions would you want to ask that person?
Questions directly. I probably ask if I'm just trying to, like, if I'm just talking to my friend, right? When just like in a casual like conversation.
Yeah, somebody you trust and you've known for a long time.
Okay. I'll just say, hey, did you go out to party last night or something? Did you watch any type of movies? Because they could be impressionable a little bit, or maybe drinking, things of that nature. Or did you?
Let's pretend the answer to all those things. Let's pretend the answer to all those things are no. Your friend was not under any influence, didn't go out and do anything irregular. He just had a normal night at home, maybe read a book. Like,
okay,
what would be your next questions?
Okay, I'd ask, are you sure you weren't asleep, or are you sure you weren't? Did you have you not slept for like a few hours beforehand? Like, did you go a long while without taking a nap and probably had a micro nap or a micro sleep? Or daydream?
So I'm seeing a pattern with your questions, and I think it's a good pattern. You're basically looking for ways to reject the claim, because the claim is so spectacular that it's like worldview altering if that claim is true. So we look for ways to reject it because we don't have the evidence for it. All the questions that you're gearing there are basically going towards his mental state and what could be the alternate explanation to what he's explaining to me. You're basically saying, for a moment, let's pretend like he's not telling me the truth. Actually, he's being truthful, but what he's telling me is actually not true. And you're trying to go to alternate explanations. This is the same exact thing that we do with all the other God claims that we experience, whether it be Yahweh or Jehovah or Vishnu or anything like that. So I guess my question is, you're a theist, right? I'm assuming you're a theist in the Christian God?
Christian God, no.
Oh, okay. Are you a theist?
I could definitely call the Christian God false if I absolutely had to.
Do you believe in a God?
One religion is false.
All right.
Yes, I believe in multiple. Yeah.
All right. In one sentence, can you describe this God to me? Just really brief.
I don't think I really can. I don't really think I can. God just came to me, and like, I guess a dream, not really a dream, but like a vision, talking about how they created the universe, the multiverses, and that they're the real God. They believe in enjoying life and studying, finding knowledge, and being good to people.
Okay. Much. And so you can imagine all the questions that you just posed to your friend who exclaimed an experience with Allah. You can imagine all these questions being given to you, right?
Yes, I could.
Okay. So now let's say the answer to the questions is all no. No, I didn't do anything to alter my brain state last night. Can people still have episodes without having done any of those things? Like, can a person have a
Absolutely, they can.
hallucination? Yeah. So even if the question,
They can.
like, I'll just accept. I'm pretty sure you'll say no. I didn't have any mind altering things happen to me that night. That's still on the table. Well, you may still have hallucinated it because the human brain just sometimes does that on its own. We don't know all the factors and all the variables that go into the environment that our brains are living in, and maybe just something out of your control, out of your knowledge happened, and it triggered a hallucination. I've had hallucinations like that. So now you're in a position of asking yourself, how is this experience that I know I had this experience? How do I know this experience was genuine? Or maybe it's something else that I can't currently explain.
That is a good point, but in the case, I can't really say if anyone did have a mental episode. I can't really predict that. I'm not a doctor. I don't have images of their brain scan. I can't really put that up
and no one is expecting you to. Like, we are not expecting you to have this ability that both Seth and I do not have. Like Seth said it earlier, you can't see what's under the skin and what's going on in the brain. The thing is, though, you need to remember that with those limitations, this makes anecdotes inherently unvaluable, inherently virtually worthless when it comes to these huge claims of deities or spirits or the spectacular. Anecdotes don't cut it.
He's had a mild stroke. Is he gone? Is he still with us?
Maybe.
No, I'm still here.
Okay, all right. All right, good. All right, yeah. Go ahead.
So DeAndre, just to kind of wrap this call up, because I mean, like I said, we've dealt with these types of anecdotes many times before. Just think about that friend of yours, a hypothetical friend of yours, bringing Allah to the table and saying, "I experienced Allah," and just ask yourself, is what I think happened to him happening to me? And what's more, another good way to put it is this: what's more plausible? Your friend actually met God, or he had some type of episode, chemical imbalance in the brain. Maybe he had bad mushrooms on pizza that he didn't realize. Maybe he touched a surface that had some type of contaminant on it that got absorbed through the skin and caused a hallucination. Like, all kinds of variables and things that you can't possibly track, you can't possibly know about could have happened. What's more plausible? Something like that happened to him, or he actually met Allah. And then take those questions and apply them to yourself. What happened to me? Did something that I couldn't have possibly seen or controlled happen to me that caused a hallucination? Or did I actually see this God? And then proportion your belief to the evidence. We know lots of people have hallucinations. We know lots of people can just have an episode out of nowhere. These things happen. These things are documented. These things are known. We have 0 confirmed encounters with a God. But we have lots of confirmed encounters with chemicals and external factors that cause hallucinations. And just pretend like you're betting money on it. Where would you place your money? You have $100. You're gonna place a bet on one of these two things. Where would you put your money? I put it on the natural.
Save money's on some type of mental episode.
Yeah, that's smart. So, all right, DeAndre, any closing comments?
Thank you. This helped me a lot, and because the chat's saying it, I'm a gender abolitionist. I'm not a transphobe or anything like that. I just don't believe in pronouns at all. Or I not believe in pronouns at all. I believe all pronouns are acceptable, at least for me. That's what I mean more by that.
All right.
Whatever. I'm not going to get hung up on it. This call is not about pronouns. This call is really about your journey. So I'm going to stay focused on that. Thanks for the call, though. I appreciate you very much.
Yep. See you, DeAndre.
All right. Thank you.
If that is a conversation you want to have, DeAndre, call in on either the Hang Up or on TACIS. Talk to individuals who are much better geared and equipped for conversations like that than
I mean, I don't mind. I think, pronouns are totally valid, but I worry that sometimes we become like, it's almost like a qualifier. If it becomes a hang up, and then that's all you're talking about at the very beginning of the call, when I myself don't get caught on that speed bump, somebody gives or doesn't give, whatever. I'm more interested in the call that comes after, whatever. And maybe some may judge me for that. I just don't think that's where I'm going to camp out. And I don't want to make that a qualifier to get on the freaking air. I just want to talk to you. So whatever. And, if you want to call and be a dick about pronouns, then that's a whole other conversation. But whether you decide to use them in your call, many times when I announce a caller, I may or may not use pronouns because it's a visual medium and it's on the freaking screen. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that there's a good balance so that we're not tripping there. Unless there's a real reason to hit the brakes and analyze what might be some real bigotry. Sometimes people just simply don't want to go there. They just rather just talk, and that's fine with me. I don't think this is a test they have to pass necessarily. The anecdote thing is interesting because when people, Dr. John Loftus has a book called The Outsider Test for Faith, and I see a doctor. I don't know, he's got at least a master's in theology. And he talks about how we use evidence demands for everybody else's religious claim, and we invoke faith for ours, right? So it's, I had a personal experience. Jesus revealed himself to me, and I know that I know that I know that I know. And somebody else says, Allah appeared to me, and Muhammad appeared in a vision, and I had a dream, and blah, blah, blah. And I know that I know that I know. And we point at them and we say, you're going to have to prove that, mister. And it's something that many, many people do, is that they use a double standard. It's faith for me, and it's evidence for everybody else. And I find that very interesting.
Yeah, I love the outsider test of faith as a conversational strategy when it comes to, exposing, hey, the double standard that's being exhibited by some theists when they say that my personal experience is somehow more valid than your personal experience. Like, oh, you had a personal experience in Allah. Well, that's obviously wrong. It wasn't Allah. It must have been these other possible explanations. But when I experience Yahweh or Jesus, that's more genuine. That's more true. The outsider test of faith is great for that. And I like using, I learned this from an individual named Pierce Watkins, who's a street epistemologist, maybe about a year ago. And he'll just paint a scenario. And if you're talking to a Christian, you simply say, okay, well, hey, Christian, pretend for a moment that an alien comes down from outer space. And this alien is comparable to us in intelligence. He knows mathematics. He knows how the world, works and things like that. But he's never heard of Christianity, and he's never heard of Islam before. And Christian, you're there trying to explain Christianity to the alien. The Muslims there trying to explain Islam to the alien. And you're both appealing to a personal experience. You're both appealing to faith, or you're both appealing to Holy Spirit, or whatever, Imagine it from the alien's point of view. How does the alien differentiate your claims? Because play by play, the Christian and the Muslim are going to say the same exact things. I had an experience. My book backs up this experience. My book says that the Holy Spirit will fill you when these things happen. I have other friends who have also had these experiences. Just like it's just this neck and neck race. And I always ask, like, from the outsider test of faith, what's the balance breaker? Like, what tips the scales in your favor? What can you give that the Muslim can't? And I've yet to hear an answer. And it's like, and if you're sitting there trying to convince Alan the alien that your religion is true, what can you possibly give that the Muslim can't give, or that the Hindu can't give, or whoever else is trying to convince them? I like that kind of a approach, and it's great, especially with street epistemology. It's a really good way to kind of expose the improperly high confidence that some theists put in these claims. So I like to do that. Okay, well, we got 2 callers in the stream. Let's go ahead and keep on going. Who's been waiting longer? All right, we have Eduardo. Pronouns he, him in Brazil. Eduardo is a theist. The question is, how do we educate everyone? How do we educate everyone to have a strong moral background? Eduardo, how are you doing?
Yes, I'm fine. What about you guys?
Doing good.
How are you doing? Yeah, great. So it's an unusual kind of call, because I'm a spiritist, and we believe that we don't believe that we have the only truth. but we believe that we reincarnate and had to grow our knowledge and our morals. So it's there are some important differences, but our standards are more or less humanist, and you know, to the point that sometimes atheists are closer to our ideas than Christians themselves, because we are Christians. Right? We believe that the Spiritism is the third revelation. So, and what I'm thinking here is this: how do we create a strong moral background without? I mean, how much should we compromise for religion? How much should we? Because you see, I think we do have to respect religions. For example, I have a aunt. She's a Jehovah Witness, and she has a genetic disease that she gets cancer. So I would actually let her die without a blood transfusion, because if I didn't, she would think that she lost her immortal life. I do think it's absurd, but so how do we do? Is that a system you guys are using out there for that?
Well, I mean, you put out a lot there. Setting aside the Jehovah's Witness example, because I know what you're talking about with the blood transfusions, but just to kind of get to the core question that you were asking, how do we educate everyone to have strong moral background? I think it's important to have a good understanding of morality and kind of where it comes from and why it works the way it does. Because a lot of individuals, they try to just set up this dichotomy of, well, morality is either subjective or objective. I liken that to trying to classify your car as a single material. Like, what is your car? Is it plastic or metal? Well, it's kind of both. It depends on what part of the car you're talking about.
Right.
And when it comes to morality,
I
think our goals, the moral goals, the things we want to see happen in the world, those are subjectively chosen. God or no, it's a subjectively chosen thing. So, for instance, like one of my goals that I want to see, I want to see accomplished is I want to see humans flourish. That's really broad, but that is one of my overarching goals. That's a subjectively chosen goal. That's a subjectively chosen goal, and then once that's chosen, now I can objectively evaluate actions that get me further to that goal or further away from that goal. So, kind of understanding that and teaching children from a young age that, hey, this is how morality works, and then asking them, what do you want to see happen in the world? Like, for instance, you give me really simple examples, like, hey, you have an ice cream and your friend Susan has an ice cream. Do you want your ice cream to be just taken away from you? Well, probably if you're a normal kid, no, I don't want that to happen. Okay. How do you think Susan will feel if that's taken away from her? And you can help kids to kind of like calibrate those goals. Like, hey, I don't want my ice cream to be taken away. Therefore, I don't want Susan's ice cream to be taken away, because that increases the likelihood mine might be taken away. Starting to like kind of break down morality and explain it to young ones in a way that they can understand helps you not only show them, them to understand what goals are more worthwhile than others, but it also helps you, like, if you come across a kid that's like, yeah, no, I want to see Susan's ice cream taken away. In fact, I want to see Susan get hurt. Like, you can start identifying kids who probably need some assistance as they develop. So I think that's a good first step. Just simply saying, well, there is this magic man in the sky, and he tells you what's right and wrong through this book that, we have lots of interpretations of, but obviously our interpretation is correct. I think that's a piss poor system. And I'm not saying that's the system you're putting forward. You said you're a spiritualist, and you're probably more aligned with humanist morals than with theistic morals.
I'm a Cartesist.
Yeah, I think that's probably a really good start. I wish people would start doing that more often. But it's probably where I would come from on that. Seth, do you have any input on that?
No, beyond something that I thought I heard you say, and I would be curious. Are you saying that we need to respect religions out there in this world? Did I hear you say that?
Yes, but I kind of yes, like more maybe than yes, because that's what I mean is this: what limits should we allow for that? I mean, no, none of us can allow anything. But if we were in authority, what would be the limit?
Okay. Well, what I'm hearing is, I want to make sure I'm hearing it correctly, is that what religions have utility in their various forms, and what's the harm? I'm still back at that square one. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I'm sorry. No. I'm not saying they are harmless. I'm saying that they are, as probably you guys know, because I think it's in another program that you deconverted, both of you. It's for some people that's their lifeline, and most people can't afford to have that broken or.
Okay, hang on. I got you now.
Right.
I got you.
Yeah.
Well, I worry a little bit. First of all, and this is really a complicated issue that I'm going to try to tackle. I'm just going to give you the bullet points and brush over it quickly. Okay. First of all, we understand the utility of religion. We understand the determiners for most religious beliefs.
Right.
Where were you born? What's the religion of your family, right? Geography and family. Right. And then what often keeps people in religion. So we've got family, geography, ritual, community, and comfort. Religion has been a great social glue. Religious narratives often help to alleviate fears of the future. There's someone in control. I'm miserable in this life. One day I will have joy in the next. And we understand this is often the balm that we apply to the misery and suffering and even the hard questions in our lives. We've seen how religions have bound together non-kin in our primate past. They have been a way for communities to organize who weren't directly related genetically. We get that, right? But the more we understand about what they were and what they are, the more we realize that they're simply not true. And I worry, first of all, that we are operating with an attitude of diminished, really a bigotry of diminished expectations when we say some people are just, they kind of need it, right? I think we need to give people more credit than that.
I see that. I see that point. I actually realized I was stepping to that trap, but I do see people that, and I don't mean that they are inferior or whatever. I mean you are good at something.
No, I didn't hear that. Here's where I'm going. If you will indulge me, Eduardo, for just another moment, and then I'll give you the oxygen to respond. Fair enough? Okay.
No problem.
Most of the stuff that brings, I think, security, comfort, and joy to religious people have nothing to do with the theology. I think they have more to do with structure, ritual, and community and people. It's like people who are practicing Jews. 50% of the people who identify as Jew have doubts about or don't believe in God outright, but they still enjoy the culture, they enjoy the dress, they enjoy the music, they have the bar mitzvah, they do all of those types of things because it really becomes the coloring, the window dressing to their existence, and they enjoy the aesthetic of that. And I think we can have that. We can have those types of things, rituals and traditions and color and dance and music and all. We can even enjoy mythology. We just know and recognize and admit that it's mythology, that it's fiction. We don't have to lie about what happened, what the scientific record says and what our history says and all those types of. We don't have to make up things and believe them as true to be able to enjoy that kind of ritual tradition and structure in our lives. And it's one of the reasons I advocate so much for humanism, because I think we have to solve more and more problems in this world so that people are looking less and less to mythologies and fictions for the answers they are not seeing here. I think we have to provide them for each other. And we understand what they are, but I don't think we have to believe the fictions to be able to have a religious aesthetic in our own lives. Okay.
Yes, yes, and it's interesting because it's kind of spiritism. We're kind of going almost there. I mean, we think that we would be like the religion of the future, but not because we are going to do anything, just because, like you said, the mythology and the question with the spiritism is that you are actually allowed to ask for that, to see, to kind of, sorry, you are actually obliged to investigate, to study other books and all kind of things. And but I like that. I like that you talk about the Jewish people, because they did solve that problem, and I think that their way is a good way to go. But meanwhile, how are we going to speed up thousands of years of evolution, for lack of a better word? That's not the word here, but they came to that conclusion in like what's their calendar year? It's like 5,782. Not sure, something like that. So how do we speed it up, but without destroying the basis? Because if you spend your life believing,
Eric, are you tracking? Eric, are you tracking? I'm lost.
I am kind of losing the thread too here, Eduardo. I mean, I agree that yes, with what Seth said about how we have dangerous evolutionary baggage when it comes to religion. Religion once held and once performed a valuable function when it came to social cohesion and unity and such. Back when we were disparate tribes doing all kinds of things that tribes do. But now that we've grown together into a more global community, that religion, we can see numerous examples of, has become more and more dangerous to that. And it's the moralities that go with those religions, because there are religions that say you must kill the infidel, and that's a good thing. There are religions, as you mentioned with Jehovah's Witnesses earlier, that says it is good to die from rejecting a blood transfusion because for some reason we think that God says that, like with the Jehovah's Witnesses.
I'm sorry, but I don't say that it's good. But I mean, I would let her do that, because
according to them
a lot. She didn't.
But Eduardo, according to them, it's Eduardo. According to them, it's good, right? It's according to the Jehovah's Witnesses, it is good to die from refusing a blood transfusion. We can look at that and we go, no, that's bad. That's a person basically throwing away their future to appease what we think is an entity that doesn't exist. So we can look at that, we can go, that's bad. That, for me, that reduces human flourishing, because we don't want people just throwing their lives away like that. Now, if there are other factors there, I think you mentioned, and she's in a lot of pain or anything like that, that would change the story. If a person is in a situation where they are in just extreme, blinding pain constantly and they wish for death, then that would alter the discussion around that.
Sorry, I was the one in pain. Maybe I mixed up things. She has a genetic disease that has cancer, but I have fibromyalgia and 24 hours in pain every day.
Yeah, but basically, like, it's a constant discussion, and the problem is that with religion confuses that discussion, because not only do we have religious folks saying that their morality is objective, wholly objective, and it comes from God, that complicates the discussion around it, because I think that's just false. Like, that morality is not coming from a God, and even if it did come from a God, it is not objective. It is subjective according to that God's mind. So it just complicates the whole thing. And I think the best way, getting back to the original question about how do we educate and teach others about this, is to demonstrate that and show that as humans, we all have generally the same wants and needs and insecurities. And generally, we can come up with a humanist moral system, a secular moral system that can accommodate these things and help us achieve worthwhile goals. And the only way we can do that is by having these discussions, talking with people about this, like we're doing right now. And we haven't even dug into your spiritualism and your theism, because that wasn't the point of this call. But we can, basically talking to people and disabusing them from these irrational beliefs and the irrational places where they get their morality, and bringing it closer to something that's more real. I think that's ultimately the best thing to do there. And having discussions like this, like I said, is the best thing to do. And we appreciate you calling in about it.
What about stimulate inner reform? That's more like, that's our idea, kind of like stimulate us, like look at the day and think what you did, what was good,
Eduardo,
what was bad, kind of like.
I think this has been pretty scattered. With your permission, I think we're going to go ahead and probably move to the next callers in the queue. It's been 16 or 17 minutes. Honestly, if somebody says they're spiritual, that's a conversation to be had. My main focus is really on if someone says, I think there's something out there, we can have that conversation. My focus these days is a little more on people who have a specific God with a proper name, pitching a certain dogma and those types of things. But I mean, the conversation about what is, go ahead.
No, sorry. It's a delay, but it's rather. I actually originally called to talk about that. I thought that the call screener should ask if I had a question.
I know this. You've had a lot of bandwidth on the air, Eduardo. I'm going to move to the next call. All right.
Have a good evening, Eduardo.
Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
All right.
All righty.
A lot of streamers on that lightning bolt. It was a lot of cloud. We would go off in different directions, and I would find myself disoriented. Literally, I was just like, "What direction are we flying at this moment?" And where are we going with it?
So, lots of tangents.
I hope it's okay that that I finally decide. Hey, thanks for
But the question itself, the original question, that's a worthwhile thing. Like, how do we figure out a moral system, or how do we educate individuals about a moral system? And I think understanding what a moral system is, how it's pieced together, is a good thing. That's a good place to start. Hopefully got some out of that.
How did you navigate that, Eric? I mean, when I came out, because I hear this all the time, you and I both hear it. Where do your morals come from?
Yeah.
And I think to myself, looking at it evolutionarily, it actually makes more intuitive sense to say that pro-social behaviors helped us as primates survive and thrive on the African savanna, right? Mm-hmm. And if we tried to go it alone, or we just hosed everybody that we met, that would be a great way to remove yourself from the gene pool. So the idea of ethical behaviors, evolved ethical systems, to me seems really intuitive. I don't know why it's so difficult for many apologists, and why they insist that it must be handed down from on high. How would you know? Or even if you are moral, you shoplifted it from my specific religion, which I think is insulting. What do you think about all that?
It goes back to, I think, part of a conversation with Alfred was basically like, hey, if it doesn't come from a God, it's somehow diminished in its value, or it's somehow not as worthwhile, like subjective versus objective. And it's like I just don't see that as being true. I don't see how that could be demonstrated to be true. For one, I've never seen an objective moral system actually be demonstrated to exist. We know subjective moral systems exist because we all possess one, but the objective one, how do you know it exists, and why is it better? Because I could point to anything in the Bible. When talking to Christians, I can point to anything in the Bible and say, okay, God supposedly gave us an objective moral system, and here in the Old Testament, God says to do this to this type of person: stone unruly children, go to the neighboring village and kill everyone, including the babies, stone adulteresses, things like that. Like we can then take my supposedly inferior subjective moral system and compare it to the supposedly superior godly objective moral system, and we can ask questions like, is it really good to judge whether a woman is a virgin on her wedding night, judging by the stains she leaves on her sheets, as in the Old Testament? Like bizarre ways of determining what's right and wrong, how to met out punishment. And we can talk to people and say, hey, according to my moral system, this is wrong. You should never, stone a woman to death because she supposedly wasn't a virgin on her wedding night. Like, that should never be the case. Why is it that it should be the case, and why is that superior? And you can get into conversations like that, which get pretty interesting because it really shows how if somebody's really, really, really married to the Old Testament, like the God of the Old Testament, they're going to start to really show their lack of humanity in that situation, and the conversation gets really spicy and fun. But yeah, just drawing out those comparisons, talking about it, I think is probably one of the best ways. If you can't get your interlocutor to come over to your side, maybe there's someone in the audience who's listening and going, "Hey, you know what? This guy's hopefully making some good points."
I actually asked some fundamental believers years ago. Abraham is the model, right? The Old Testament Abraham, father of the Abrahamic religions, someone to be emulated in terms of the massive amount of faith that Abraham demonstrated. And they're like, yes, we love Abraham. We taught songs to our children about a father Abraham had many sons. We learned this when we were 5. Many sons had father Abraham. All right, fine. If God appeared to you the way he appeared to Father Abraham, and he asked you to drag your kid up and throw him on an altar and then execute him, would you do that? And most of the people are like, well, it was a different time. Or they come up with all these apologetics. But I have met a few believers who say, I don't really believe they believe this, but they say, oh, well, if God demanded it, I would obey. Those people terrify me. Those people
are scary individuals. They're very scary. Because like
Father Abraham.
It could be inside. They really don't believe that, but they're just simply paying lip service to the God. But there's that 1% chance in there is like, wow, this person might be serious. Like somebody calls CPA, like this person's dangerous.
Crazy. By the way, Stephanie, our call screener, used a term in the chat that I'd never heard before. Hose beast. Somebody is talking about if somebody ever called and they were being a total hose beast. I've never heard that. Hang on just a second. Hold on.
Gotta Google that.
Hose beast. Hey, callers, I know callers are waiting. Hose beast.
Sorry, callers. This is important.
This is critical. This is us expanding our knowledge base. Slang. Oh shit! This is Urban Dictionary. Hang on. A woman, it's got to be both men and women. I'm sure it didn't mean just women, who is ruthless, evil, and outright objectionable in both physical and mental presence. A hose beast. Oh God, I got to use this in a sentence at some point. Can I use it for anybody, anywhere? Because hose beast is a great word, unless I'm missing something. I hope it's not offensive. I hope I haven't said a slur by accident and in my ignorance.
It's okay. Just blame Stephanie if that's the case.
I'm blaming Stephanie for planting this new knowledge in my head. You are responsible and you will be judged. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That was a pretty good sound wave. Do you ever watch Transformers as a kid? That was a pretty good sound wave voice there. I'm impressed there.
Hose beast. Awesome.
All right. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to our next caller before we go down another rabbit hole. We have a theist on the line. So sorry, atheist, going to bump you down one. We're going to bring up Michael. Pronouns he, him. Michael's from North Carolina. Hey, I lived in North Carolina for 3 years. It's a beautiful state. Michael's a theist, and he'll explain why he believes in God. So hello, Michael. Feel free to explain to us why you believe in God.
Hey, guys. Well, first, I want to change my pronouns to hose beast. Is that possible?
I don't know if it's a pronoun. It's a proper noun, or at least an actual noun. But you can use it in a sentence during the call, and we'll let that go. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Cool.
So, why do you believe in God? And be prepared for us to interrupt you, because if you hit something that's like, okay, hold on, we got a little bit of a hang up here, we may interrupt you. So, just giving you a heads up.
All right, I got it. So I was an atheist for about 20 years or so, for a long time. And I've always had questions of, where we come from, the meaning of life, why is there something rather than nothing, things like that. And I really felt that, science didn't really answer those questions. They didn't get, ain't get me closer to any type of truth. And
the belief in the God did?
Yes. Yeah. It did. And yeah, because I started asking myself, well, what is truth? You know, and well, what if truth is something that I don't like? What if I find truth and it's that we're all just going to die, and I don't like that truth? And then so it's not truth that I'm really wanting. It's
interesting
value. Yeah. So it's
so
like,
you think, wait. Do you
what
think your
truth
values would be as or more valid if they were lies?
I don't think it would matter. It depends, right? But I think that having what? All right, so lies, right? Like
Maybe
yes,
that's
if it's a lie,
that's a too
but it brings
provocative a term.
value.
Let's say falsehood.
Yeah.
Falsehood. If these were falsehoods.
Yes, if it was falsehood and it has value, then what? Then why not? And because look, there's truth, but what if the truth is something you don't agree with? Like, what if the truth is harmful in a way? Like you would reject.
Give me an example of that. Give me an example of a truth that is harmful to you, and a lie or a falsehood that would be more in tune with values, good values.
Sure. Well, one truth is that like we all die, and life is sort of just meaningless in a nihilistic sense. And so that is the truth that we're all going to die. I don't find that comforting. No one does. Maybe some people do. So we all start to create these falsehoods for ourselves to give ourselves meaning, whether it's science or religion, whatever it is. We have to deal with that in our own minds some kind of way. And this is how I started thinking, right? I started really questioning these sorts of ideas about myself, like truth seeking. When I say I want the truth, or I want to believe in as many true things as possible, what am I really saying? Because if I find truth, I might not accept it, I might like it. So it's not really truth that I'm after. So that's
okay. Well, actually, I want to pinball back to Eric real quick. Eric, did we not just have a call a minute ago where we were talking about why, first of all, a finite life is not a meaningless life? Mm-hmm. I thought we had that conversation because I heard you say nothing matters or it's meaningless if we're all going to die. That's what I heard you say, Michael, right?
Unless we find we have to create our meaning ourselves, right?
Unless we create our own meaning. Yes, that's exactly right. But still, would you not prefer to live a harder reality than a happy fantasy? Isn't there merit in embracing what is true, even if it's more difficult to navigate?
If there's merit in it, it depends. I just know that if we're talking about truth and what's true, because merit's subjective, right? What I
not
find
necessarily
have merit and what you find have merit
not
are going to be different. Well, if I'm making if I'm placing value, or if I'm saying if something has merit or not, then it would be through my subjective understanding of the values that I have.
But I think you and I, as human beings, as co-travelers on this planet, could agree on the difference between joy and suffering, right? And we would see the merit in having a life that was filled with joy. And we would want to live a life that eliminated suffering, right? I mean, we could probably agree on those types of things. But an eternal life, these things don't hinge on an eternity. They can be about the here and the now on a finite existence. That's fair, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I'm not implying that this has anything to do with like an eternal life. That like so we find a reward in heaven. That's not what I'm.
Okay, well, I just got hung up on meaningless because we're going to die, and so I made that connection. Maybe I made it wrongly. I'll shut up now and let you and Eric kind of finish the things out. Maybe maybe he's got an angle that I haven't thought of yet.
So Michael, I actually locked on to a comment you made a little earlier. You said it's not truth I really want, and I was going to ask:
Correct.
Are you basically looking for comfort and utility over the truth?
Well, I think as suffering beings, we all are. So yes.
As suffering beings, you think we all are. So you don't think there are individuals who will take the truth and along with it sacrificing some happiness?
But that's
because I can point to numerous occasions where I've done that, where I have chosen to go with where the evidence leads me rather than clinging on to a belief which may be false but gives me comfort. So I don't think I think that blanket term that we all do this, I don't think that's correct. We may inadvertently do it to some degree or another, but I'm not conscientiously doing it. And if I identify a point where I'm like, okay, what do I do? Do I investigate and find out the truth, or do I just hold on to this belief about this thing because it gives me comfort or I find some type of utility in it? I'll choose to investigate. Is that something you would do, or would you say, "Hey, I'm just going to stay ignorant about this because what I currently believe about it makes me feel good"? What would you choose?
Yeah. So if there's something that I want to believe in and I find there's a truth in it, and then I reject it, and I would go, well, that's not the truth, and I would keep investigating until I found truth that aligns with. And I think that's what people do, but subconsciously, I think everybody does that. You know what I mean?
I said earlier that some of us might do that to some degree or another unconsciously, but there are people who actively avoid doing that. Now, I'm not saying we're perfect at it, but we actively avoid doing that. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pin down where your values are, because we could potentially have a very fundamental difference in our values. I value truth over comfort. Is that true of you, or do you value comfort over truth?
I think innately everyone
I'm asking you. I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not asking.
Yeah, by everyone I mean myself also.
Repeat that one more time and just simply say, "I think this," not "I think and everyone else thinks this." Just say, "I think X." What is what you think?
That I think that the truth is what I find value in.
That's not what I asked.
And that if I found truth, yeah. Sorry.
Hold on, Michael. I'll say the question again. Like, listen to the question carefully, because I'm asking something very, very specifically. Eric, I value truth over comfort. Michael, is that the case with you, or do you value comfort over truth?
I don't know what this. If I value comfort over truth, yes. No, I don't. You know, I don't know how to answer. I never really thought of. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That might be something for you to take away and think about, because you can ask yourself. You have two paths forward. Okay, in your life and in the rest of your life, you have two paths forward. You can ask yourself, do I value truth over comfort? That's one path. Or the other path, do I value comfort over truth? And imagine how your life will play out with those two outlooks all the way to your grave. How will your life play out? From my point of view, when I imagine those two paths, if I were to value comfort over truth, I see myself making more mistakes in life, doing things that will harm me more. I will see dangers and pitfalls that I could have avoided had I been more of a person who valued truth over comfort rather instead. Like, I can see all kinds of problems going forward in life, valuing comfort over truth. because if we don't, even just down to just a species, I'm an individual, an animal, and a species type level. If I don't have an accurate understanding of reality, my ability to thrive and flourish, and even in some cases survive, diminishes. And I don't want that. So that's why I value truth over comfort. I don't care if it makes me feel bad. I care that I have an accurate understanding of reality, because then I can survive. And in many cases, I'll say this last bit, and I'll let you give me your response. In many cases, things that may appear to be very discomforting, like for instance, when I dropped the God belief, that was a painful experience. Like, man, I'm not going to live forever anymore. I don't have somebody looking over me and watching my back. When I look at a beautiful sunset, I have no one to thank. This is just the natural processes. No one gave this to me. I had my low point after that. But then once I got past that, I saw opportunity. I saw opportunity to learn, to make my life grow, to appreciate the amazing natural processes that are going on around us. So I had a slight dip in my outlook, but then, man, it went up way higher after that, way beyond anything I had in theism, because I found opportunity in the problem. So now I had truth and opportunity to make my life better. And I feel like that I've exploited that. And that's really done well for me in my life. My life is in a much better place than it was 15 years ago. That's why I value truth over comfort. So anyway, I'll let you give your response, and then we're going to move on to a different caller. But I encourage you, think about that question. Which one do you pick, and why do you pick it? Imagine your life on that path and what will happen. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So how do you know what you're believing in is true or not?
That's a good question. That comes down to a thing called epistemology, the theory of knowledge. What process do we use to evaluate things around us and come to truth claims? And in a nutshell, my epistemology is based on reason and logic, and the knowledge and the honest self-reflection, the honest recognition of, sorry here, the honest self-reflection, the fact that I don't have all the evidence, I do not have the full picture. So all the things that I hold to be true, I hold to various levels of confidence. I don't say I'm 100% confident in any particular claim. I don't say I'm, even in many cases, 99 or 98%. I'll hold everything to a level of confidence, and I'll always keep in everything that I hold the possibility that I might be wrong. And if it turns out I am wrong about that, and the evidence can show that, then I have no problem shifting my belief, because I didn't fully commit to X, Y, or Z. I held it all to a certain level of confidence, and I think that's the honest way to evaluate and deal with reality around us, because we have our limitations and we have to work around that. So that's me. That's my epistemology, and that's how I approach things.
Okay. So so reason and logic, right? So when it comes to truth, like you said, you're never going to know 100% confidence of anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that's right.
And you can never. So then you're to know the truth of anything, and what you're calling a truth, then becomes.
Here's the thing. Yeah, here's the thing. Like I said, we have limitations that we deal with. We don't have all the evidence, and we are just flawed meat computers, on a rock hurtling through space. Once you embrace those limitations, and once you realize, hey, this is the case, and there's nothing we can do about it, it's very liberating, because now you can say to yourself, okay, I don't have to be perfect in what I do. I don't have to be perfect in my evaluations. I just have to do the best I can and maintain the intellectual agility to change my position when evidence comes forward to show me that my previous position was wrong. I have no problem doing that. And it can be uncomfortable. It can be, it can be unsettling sometimes, realizing, hey, something I believe for 20 years is actually wrong. Boy, do I feel dumb. But it gives me the ability to move beyond that and keep on going. And as I said before, having an accurate understanding of reality increases my ability to flourish in it. And from my point of view, that's exactly what I've gone through. Anyway, go ahead. Let's close up and move on to the next call. So go ahead.
Yeah. So when you evaluate the evidence for what you think is true based on your judgment is based on the values that you place from your subjective mind, right? Your subjective experiences. So then what happens is what you are calling the truth becomes what you value, whether it's comfort or whatever it is.
I think
And
you're
that's through your
conflating.
epistemology.
I think you're conflating values with like a logical process in the brain. Like I value truth, sure. So in a way that, yeah, if I don't value truth, then my epistemology is not going to be geared towards that. And sure, you can probably say that. But like I said, I think
Well,
it's one
are
of my
you
precepts.
not?
Go ahead.
Is your epistemology not based on wanting to know what the truth is?
It is.
Okay. So if you're wanting to know what the truth is, and then you say your epistemology relies on reason and logic, which includes evidence of truth claims that you apply your judgments to, when your judgments of that evidence comes from your subjective experiences of the world, then is it not that your truth is based on what your experiences of the world and the values that you place on that evidence?
I think maybe the disconnect is, I think that maybe the disconnect is it's not my truth. One of the presuppositions that I hold is that there's one reality that we all experience.
Is that what?
And
Can you answer that?
Okay.
That question, is that like a yes or no?
No, I think if I may, if I can jump in, having sort of been hovering over the conversation for a moment, I think what I'm hearing is that you're saying that he would determine what was true or false based on his own subjective biases. Well, he might have a desire to discern what is true, and he might even have a hope that something might be true or false. But the scientific process itself is designed to go beyond what we desire. And so we test and we retest and we see what outcome or outcomes there are. And those outcomes aren't going to care what we feel about them. And so scientific testing, rigorous scientific testing and retesting within the reality in which we occupy, that exists beyond how we feel about the results, right?
There is an amount of empiricism that science can produce that's just strictly empirical evidence, but that's always going to be filtered through the human mind when we read whatever that empirical evidence is.
There is some truth that you cannot remove the human element from the process.
Right.
There will always be some human biases, but the process itself is scientists coming from it from all manner of backgrounds, attitudes, personalities, education, spheres, and they are all doing comparative tests and retests to keep each other honest. I think the perfect here is the enemy of the good. The process itself will produce results, hopefully replicable results, and it won't matter what we feel about those results. The important thing is the tests and the results themselves. And I think those can happen within the reality that we occupy. And we can see that 2 + 2 is 4, and these chemicals react in this certain way together, and these genes do this, and these things can be analyzed and observed and documented and replicated. That's the scientific process, the scientific method. And they exist beyond how we feel about them. And I think that's the difference. Okay?
Yeah. And the scientific method, and Seth is absolutely correct in that no matter what step in the process, we are going to have subjective minds at play. But the scientific method is designed to minimize that impact as much as possible. And that's why we have things like repeatability, standards of evidence, the method itself of falsification, and all these things. The system is designed to reduce the impact of our limitations on the process. And
isn't the system designed around God?
No.
With the idea of metaphysics in mind from Newton? Wasn't his whole proposition that all the mechanics that he had, he said was God orchestrating these things. Like that Newton believed that his gravity, his mechanics, the laws that he made came from God.
It may be the case that many it may be the case that many historical scientists did believe in God and may have attributed what they do in science to discovering what God does. And there's still scientists today that do that.
Right.
But ultimately,
So
it's the pursuit. Ultimately, so Michael, hold on. Michael, I wasn't done yet. Ultimately, science is the pursuit of reality and an understanding of reality. God might be in there and God might not be in there. But until we have evidence to show that, we don't count it. The same way that we don't count any other, mystical explanations like unicorns or leprechauns or vampires. Until there's evidence to show that there's a God involved, God's not involved. And it doesn't matter.
And this gets to my point, which is that.
Go ahead.
And this gets to my point because I'm sorry. One of your names is Eric. What's the other person's name? I apologize. I'm not looking at the screen.
It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Just keep making your point.
Okay. Hose beast. All right. All right. So the scientific process. if you think that
let's make it fast. Well, let's make this fast.
Okay, fine. If you say it has empiricism, right, and that it's just strictly empirical, but see, that's what I'm saying. That's your value of truth and how you use it. But then you have somebody like Newton, which invented all of these things, and his value of what the scientific method is that it is to find God. It was very much rooted in God and theology, right? So, like you're saying now, well, science don't have any science.
And this idea that science is any one person. Science is not a person. Science is a process, and science existed long before Newton or anybody else. And so I think the invocation of the metaphysical, etc., does not help us here. We want to root ourselves in the physical, in the natural, in the testable, in the provable, or hopefully provable. And with that, Michael, we appreciate your call so much, and have a good night.
Okay, all right, y'all have a good one. Yes, sir.
All right,
thank you, Michael.
All right, I had to draw a hose beast. Like, this is what a hose beast would look like. If I was a genetic scientist, I would want to go and create a hose beast. I'm not sure exactly what I would marry.
I think there are some lines science should not cross, and I think
you don't think so?
Right here.
Like,
no.
I know they're trying to resurrect the woolly mammoth, but if there is a hose, like, what would you? I could cross a woolly mammoth with something else. A Tasmanian devil and a hamster and maybe something else, and maybe we could come up with it. I wanted a thin hose-like body, so this is my interpretation of the hose beast. So,
I was going much more. I mean, you have one hose in your hose beast. I was going to go like way more hoses. In my hose beast.
Multiple hoses.
Imagine like a beholder from Dungeons and Dragons, or like some Lovecraftian like tentacle monster, except instead of tentacles or hoses.
Kind of a Cthulhu of hoses.
Yeah. Kind of just like doing its thing and just kind of spraying whatever liquids come out of those hoses all over the place. I mean, like that would be. We need to get AI on this.
I am so easily amused. This is the shit that I do to amuse myself. How old am I? Am I 12? Jeez.
All righty. Okay, folks, lines are closed. We have 2 callers left, and they're both atheists. Let's see if we can get through these maybe fairly quickly. So who's been waiting the longest? Justin for Utah. Justin, he, him, atheist. How you doing, Justin?
I'm doing okay. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're doing good. I think we're getting a little loopy. It's 2 hours in, and we're drawing hose beasts, and I think we're degrading pretty quick here. But let's go into your question here. Your question is, do you think that belief in a higher power is understandable if you're going through a rough time in life, even if it's still irrational? And this kind of ties into our previous conversation. So this is a good question.
Yeah. I was a little bit disappointed kind of sitting in hearing you kind of talk with the discussions they brought up, because I have a feeling you'll probably kind of make the same points. But I guess I'm still.
Yeah, you read my mind.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. I'm still kind of curious to hear, your take, at least maybe framed from like my perspective.
Sure.
So,
Sure. Going by the
yeah.
literal words in your question, I do think it's understandable. Like, you can be an atheist, and if you're having a hard time, I can understand the urge, the draw to say, well, maybe I should just pray to a God just in case, or things like that. There's lots of cases where people stop believing something, but the specter of that belief still haunts them for the rest of their life. And we see that with a lot of individuals, where they're dealing with like hellfire, or they're dealing with, a wanting desire to see their loved ones again in heaven and such. Their brain is
Yeah.
telling them this is not logically cohesive. You don't believe this, but the desire is still there. So in a sense, yes, it is understandable. We're humans with desires, and it's really hard to get out from under the conditioning that many of us have gone through growing up. Like, it's understandable. And I appreciate that you recognize that it is irrational. So, and that's kind of the human condition. It's the tug of war between the emotional and the logical, between what we want and what reality actually is. And I think that's been kind of the theme for a lot of our calls tonight. It's understandable. Recognizing that, I think, is important, and saying, hey, you know what? I am just an imperfect human. I've gone through a lot. I've had lots of pressures and conditionings put upon me as I was younger. I know better now, and I'm going to try to do better now. And I think just keeping that in mind and moving forward with it is usually the best thing to do there. I am never of the opinion that you should surrender your rationality and your logic in order to feel good. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. Seth,
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Justin. Let's have you respond, Justin, and then Seth can give his 2 cents on that if he wants.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say to maybe kind of open up a little bit, and I'm not trying to turn this into like some kind of like therapy session. I just want to make that clear up front. But like I'm sure you guys know people in your lives who have dealt with this, and maybe their level of struggle with it has varied. But like, I'm on the autism spectrum, and I was in denial about that for most of my life. It's funny because I was actually diagnosed when I was about 11, and funnily enough, to kind of keep it in theme to the call, the thing that actually caused me to kind of get officially get diagnosed with it was because I ended up having to be put into an inpatient care center for about 3 weeks because I had a big nervous breakdown, and a lot of it was because I didn't grow up in a super religious family. It's funny, Seth, like you, I grew up in Oklahoma, but my family is pretty liberal. We were one of the few liberals in Oklahoma growing up in the 90s. But they did have me go to like church camps and stuff like that when I was growing up. And I also did go to when I was in kindergarten, they did have me go to like a Methodist school. They took me out of that afterwards because they realized it just both economically but also socially, because they wanted me to like understand the world. It made more sense that I was in a public school, but I ended up having a big emotional breakdown because like when I was in kindergarten, they did go into like Christian school. They told us we learned all about Jesus and like all those stories and stuff. They never once, to my recollection, mentioned hell or Satan. That was something that was not like instilled into me until I like was in second grade and going to summer like Christian camps and stuff like that. And it freaked me out so much that I ended up going, that led to me going to that that inpatient care when I was 11. And when I came out the other side of that, the people who were treating me there, they treated me with being on the autism spectrum. And as such, with that, I've really struggled to really find and forge and maintain good, meaningful relationships in my life. And in fairness, like with that, there's been like this feeling of like, well, if God is real, I don't know why he would like, kind of like hoist that on me in the same way, like if he's against
homosexuality or whatever, why is he putting those like feelings on anyone else? But obviously that's not a rational reason to disbelieve in God. It's just that there's no proof.
Okay, if I may jump in, Justin, quickly, if I may,
go ahead.
because I don't want to drift too far away from our point. You've thrown a lot of stuff out, but when you say if you're going through a rough time, is it understandable to reach out or embrace the idea of a higher power? Are you talking about yourself? And what would the belief in a higher power do? How would that sort of medicate or balm the situation?
If I'm being honest, Seth, I really don't know. Like, because I've tried a couple of times over the years to like go to like maybe like church communities that are maybe a little bit more inclusive or whatever, and not as dogmatic, and that's maybe helped a little bit in the moment. But I always kind of come back to the same thing of like, there's just no proof for this. Like, it doesn't, like, there's really no reason to like put faith in something that there's, like you said, literally zero reason to believe in.
Well,
that's why I put in the question. That's why I put in the question and recognize that it's irrational. But I don't know. Like maybe it's just something about how I'm programmed. But I still kind of come back to it. Go ahead.
I have two thoughts. The first thought is, I think this though provides an opportunity for us. I find often in atheist circles this tendency to talk about religious people as if they're all sheeple, they're all brain damaged, they're all idiots, they're all broken, they're all hateful, they're all bigots, they're all. Well, first of all, if you hear somebody speaking in all nothing terms, you know that this is lazy and very wrong-headed ways to approach human beings. And I think people who embrace religious belief or who have been indoctrinated or who are leaning into a faith tradition for community or comfort or any number of reasons, I think so often we have to approach this with empathy and humanity. And I know it's not popular in the meme verse when people want to feel superior and whatnot, but I mean, a lot of people are going through tough times. And they have medicated through those times by painting the silver lining on very dark clouds. It doesn't mean it makes any sense. But I'll tell you, if we see somebody who has gone through a tragedy, and I think, did I mention earlier in this show, maybe it was in the speech I did online this morning for another organization about someone who lost a child to cancer, right? Well, if someone holds on to the belief that one day they will meet their young child again, and there will be they will once again be a united family in heaven. There's no evidence to support that. We know that the biblical idea of heaven has been debunked. We know it's fiction. We know it's bullshit, right? But as a humanist, is the right thing for me to do to go up to that person who has lost a child and say, you realize that this whole heaven reunion thing is bullshit, right? Is that the right thing to do? Even if I was right in point of fact, is that the humanistic thing to do? Or should this person be approached with more empathy and compassion? And I think, speaking to this desire to say, man, I would even try sometimes because I understand it might make me feel good in the moment. I think we have to treat a lot of those folks with empathy and compassion. But in your voice, Justin, and I'm not a psychologist, but tell me if I'm close. What I hear is not necessarily the desire to believe in a higher power, God, heaven, Xanadu, whatever. What I'm hearing is a desire for connection. Would that be close?
1,000%. Like, if I'm being 100% honest, like, if scenarios were completely different, if life had gone the way I had hoped it would, if I was in a better place than I've been, I don't really know that I would have much reason or interest, or the thought would even cross my mind to begin with. And again, that's why I recognize it's completely irrational. But I also recognize that I'm human, and and even if it goes against my values, it's still something that I can't help but contemplate sometimes.
You got to hand it to religion, right? Right or wrong, true or false. Religions do community and connection really, really well. And it's, I think, one of the attractions that people have. It's why so many people go to church and they don't know anything about what's in the Bible. Like, if they want to know what's in the Bible, they got to ask me and Eric, right? We got to tell them what's in their own Bible, because they're not attending church for reasons of theology. They're going for more for reasons of community. They want to connect. And I sense that this is a very human thing. And I think that's a very human thing in you. And honestly, if you were to ever talk to my friends that recovering from religion or secular therapy, or just people in the online free thought and humanistic space, I think there are alternatives to religious models that might speak to that human connection that you seek. And it would be my hope that you could find those, because I really think life is better when it's shared. I know it sounds like a freaking Hallmark movie, Eric, but I mean, don't you feel like most of us have evolved, Eric, to crave a sense of connection with our fellow travelers on this planet?
Absolutely. We're a social species. And I think it's been demonstrated time and time again, even under scientific rigor, isolating individuals away from social contact is highly detrimental to the brain. It's very, very bad for you to be isolated. So yeah, naturally, we're going to want to congregate and cohere and do all these things. And religion's been around for thousands of years, just fine tuning its little role in that and facilitating that in our society. So yeah, absolutely.
Does any of that help, Justin?
A little bit. I'm curious, Seth. Like, I mean, these like online communities, if like any of them actually will have like any kind of like in-person meetups, and everything, like, because I guess like that's more what I'm needing, I'd say, more than anything.
Yeah, I get that. Online community goes only so far. It's a different flavor of community, but there's nothing like sharing an actual physical space. I don't have a perfect answer for you. You know how I scratch the itch, and I cheat a little bit because I'm a speaker. But I go out to free thought events, humanist events, and I've got another one coming up in Minneapolis in 3 weeks, and I'm going to be in Nashville. I'm going to Calgary, Alberta, and so we get to spend a weekend. And I'll tell you, people go, they buy their tickets, and the speakers are fun, and the music, and the comedians, and the food, and all that is fine. But I'm convinced that the bigger reason people go is to belong and to connect. Right? Many people end up like lying to their parents or their whoever about where they went. Oh, we're going to a marriage retreat, right? And they are desperate to be able to be authentic for just a few precious hours and to be accepted for who they are without judgment. And I know local free thought groups have you might have to Google it for your own city. Again, RFR might have a connection point for you locally where you can meet. I would also look into, depending on your region, whether or not there is an Oasis group, which is a wonderful humanist organization. They've got a big tent. Everybody's welcome. They are lovely. And then there are groups, some secular groups as well. Anyway, that's what I would do is maybe do a Google search for your region, rather, and then include the words free thought, humanist, secular, maybe atheist. But I think it's the humanist secular part that's probably going to be more attractive to you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Justin,
it was. Sorry, go ahead.
To put a coattail on what Seth said, then let you go. Those are excellent suggestions. There's also websites such as like meetup.com where you can find like-minded groups or even form your own if there is one in your area. You're in Utah, so hopefully you're in like kind of a moderately to majorly populated area where you have lots of options for the association that you're craving. And so you can go to meetup.com, check things out, and like that. I mean, I've gone to secular atheist groups on meetup.com. I formed my own video game group years ago on meetup.com that lasted for over a year, and I had made new friends, had them come over. We were playing Street Fighter 4 all day. It was great. And it's because when I deconverted, I felt that same itch. I was like, I need to make some new friends because I lost almost my entire social circle when I left the Jehovah's Witnesses, because like I said, they're so socially insulated, and if you leave, you leave. Like, they aren't going to talk to you anymore. There are options to do that, and if you can't find anybody in the area that is doing what you want to do, be the change you want to see and start your own group and see what kind of momentum you can pick up on that. Before you know it, you'll have 2, 3, 4, 5 people Obviously, play it safe. Meet in public places first. Get to know them. Things like that. Obviously, be careful. Meet new people, but you never know what you can do. Just a little bit of effort.
Okay. Hey, it was good, Seth, Eric. It was good talking to you guys. You guys have a good night, and
You too.
I'm sure I'll call again some other time in the future. So,
May your evening, may your week be free of hose beasts, Justin. And thanks so much for calling the show. Appreciate
those
it.
hose beasts.
All right. Take care, guys.
Goodbye.
I just had to throw the hose beast in. Stephanie, I blame you. Stephanie's fault. Stephanie's fault.
Hose beasts are probably welcome if you really need to water your lawn, right? So you just hook up the hose beast.
I would think a hose beast would be domesticated. Like the hose beast would only be a problem if you were maybe an outsider, a threat, or maybe just a general douchebag. But then if you maybe had a pet hose beast, maybe that would be a domesticated creature that you would spend time with. So
I'm imagining a ranch of just like thousands of hose beasts, like they're
like herds.
Like herds of them, yeah. Really, really well watered lawns on those ranches.
God, what has happened to us, Eric? What has happened?
Going crazy. All right, we got one more to go through, and then maybe, I don't know. Today's Sunday, so there's no super chats tonight. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up with this. Coming up here, we have Mark, him from CT. That's Connecticut. Yeah, Mark, ignore the hose beast on the screen there. That's just a figment of your imagination. Mark, how you doing? Your comment here is you had a recent conversation with some people who are trying to convince him to believe. I'm guessing it means you to believe. Had a recent conversation with some people who are trying to convince you to believe, and they seem to short circuit the Bible. Wonder if there's a better approach. The comment's a little poorly worded here, so can you reiterate it to us so we can understand better?
Sure. Before I get too far into it, I'd also like to say that volunteer organizations are also a great place to find community. So to tail and onto what Justin was saying there.
I like that.
But
thank you.
Yeah. But essentially I went out with a couple of friends and some friends of theirs, and some of these groups, some of these people were part of a Christian religious group of sorts, and kind of were very upfront about it. And up here in Connecticut, it doesn't happen too much. It's not very in your face, so it was very, I don't want to say jarring, but it was different. Anyway. I basically pushed back and tried to say, yeah, but how can you get from point A, from nothing to specifically this book where all of your proof is coming from? This isn't a science textbook. I can't take the mathematical equations for gravity and test them out myself. Mm-hmm. But you've got the Bible, you've got the Quran, you've got the Bhagavad Gita. And like, how do you assert this? And the thing that kept coming up typically was prophecy, and amongst other things. But the prophecy thing they really got stuck on, and specifically about there's something about a descendant of a king with a certain name, and then an altar will be rend. And they couldn't see how you've given somebody a guidebook to accomplish something, and then you're also just claiming it's true without any original sourcing, any original manuscripts, anything to back it up. It is part of a story. And it was almost like they couldn't comprehend it. They just kept short-circuiting right back to
Yeah, because they're in a state of they've already accepted the Bible as true, whether with justification or not. And in many cases, I'm one of these people. When I was young, I was born into the religion. I was told it was true. I trusted my elders and my parents, so I just believed it was true. So yeah, that's a hard thing to get over, because in their mind they are holding this book of true things, but really they don't have the justification for it. Typically, when I'm in a situation like that, I like to to draw them out and get them to justify their confidence in those beliefs. This is what I like so much about street epistemology, because street epistemology is all about taking a claim. In the case of your friends, the claim is that the Bible's true, or the Bible has this prophecy and this prophecy came true. You take the claim, then you ask the what, and that's asking what is the claim, the why do you believe it, and then the how do you know. And so that's kind of the three levels you go through. What's the claim? Why do you believe it? So they should probably tell you, like, okay, well, the Bible says, it's a prophecy, therefore I believe it. Then you get down to how do you know that that's actually true? Because you can claim that the Bible is, the Word of God and it has this prophecy in it. But the real question comes down to how do you know that that's true? How do you justify it? How do you gauge your confidence in it appropriately? That typically is the direction I like to go in. And my favorite kind of vectors to attack the Bible from are one is like the authenticity of the Gospels. We have things like the synoptic problem. That's a big issue with the Gospels. We have things like copyist fatigue that is evident in the Gospels. The fact that the Gospels are written, 1,000 miles away, 40, 50 years after the events what supposedly occurred by anonymous authors, things like that. And so I like to formulate questions to explore those issues with the individual that I'm talking to. And that's what I use, like I said, street epistemology for. So if they're always going back to the Bible, zero in on something that's like, hey, okay, this particular claim you're making about the Bible, why do you think that's true? Get their answer. And then get to how do you know that that's true? How do you know that that thing that you said is the why is actually true or is actually supportive of your claim? And that might potentially help you if you kind of change up the strategy, because you're right. Christians usually just go to the Bible's true because the Bible is true, and breaking that cycle could be very difficult.
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to think of the words here for it.
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can put words in your mouth, Mark. You're frustrated because
Sure.
they seem to be quoting the book to prove the book, right? And it's like, hey, wait a minute. Why are you quoting the Bible to prove the Bible? Why are we not able to speak about these bigger ideas? Why are you so myopic and hyper locked into the words of Scripture as actual fact, and you have not questioned them? Is that what I'm hearing, Mark?
Yes, that. But there's also a bit of I won't say frustration on my part. I kind of grew up in a weirdly, I don't want to say tumultuous circumstance. But even though my family is vaguely religious, we never really made it to church. And by the time those ideas got around to me, it was later high school, and I was very much a you can believe what you can believe type person up until I started hearing these, and there was like a patent absurdity to me by that point in time in my life. I don't have the background of that mindset, the background of the history or the lore, so to speak, I guess, to understand. So I feel ill-equipped to put myself in their shoes.
Well, I don't think honestly, you've taken an awful lot of responsibility on your own shoulders to try to disabuse this person of their biblical allegiances. It's not certainly a conversation worth having, but I believed absurd things in the Bible for an embarrassing length of time. I'm embarrassed that I was in my late 20s, early 30s and still bought the talking snake and the donkey that spoke Hebrew and the underwater sea monster and the 900-year-old humans and the deity that impregnated a virgin teenager with himself, those types of things. And it had been programmed into me from early childhood. It was my normal. There were so many other reasons that, I had embraced it. But, it's when I was a true believer, I was also invested in knowing the truth with a capital T. It fed my ego, a feeling of superiority. I was threatened by other worldviews. I wasn't interested in hearing anybody else's perspective, blah, blah, blah. So I think you have to assess your friend or whoever your interlocutor is. Where are they? Are they a closed system? What's your goal in engaging? Are you the right person to engage? Do you have the right knowledge base or experiential overlap or background or credibility or personal and relational equity with that person? And honestly, you may not be the person. You may not be the one to have those harder conversations. Maybe the better thing to do is to simply live a loud, proud, non-believing, non-Christian life in full view, in the hopes that when your friend gets there organically and has some doubts, they can see that you're secular and that you are non-religious, and maybe you'll be the first phone call they make. I don't know. That's my 2 cents for what it's worth.
Yeah, they weren't like close friends. It was moreover there was a gathering and they were acquaintances of somebody else there, and they just, I don't know how the conversation started, but once they got on it, they locked on, and that's all they wanted to talk about.
Yeah, that's obnoxious.
More like I was on the defensive.
Yeah, I mean, and they're like, prove God doesn't exist, and they're quoting scripture to prove scripture. I don't find those conversations really productive, especially when there are people who are, when it's almost like this person doesn't want to look weak in front of an audience. But if you are put in that position, I think the best thing to do is to shift and do a little SE on them, right? And to ask them basic questions about what they're saying. So it's not prove you're God, those types of things. It's like, oh, do you believe then in the Adam and Eve story in the book of Genesis? Yes, I do. We came from Adam and Eve. Well, who wrote the book of Genesis? Who is the person who actually wrote that book? Can you tell me when it was written, who wrote it, and how we know that? And just ask a series of these questions. Do you believe the 10 commandments are the most important commandments ever given to humankind by God? Yes, the 10 commandments, the most important. Okay, can you name them for me? And we know that the vast majority of Bible believers can't name even half of the 10 commandments. So you watch them. Now, you're not being a dick. You are not asking them ambush questions. You're asking them basic questions about their faith. So you're not making a claim. You're just saying, well, where did that come from? How do you know that? How would you determine or prove that to somebody else? And just sort of flip the script on them a little bit. I find that there's a lot of utility in that, not because you're going to change their mind, but I think you might plant a seed in the minds of some of the spectators in that room who are watching both ideas or counter ideas presented. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, and what Seth said there is very accurate, because it really comes down to, you want to plant a seed, because you're not going to sway a person over to your position in one conversation. If you do, something very, very wrong just happened there. Like such a huge position of the Bible is God's word all the way over to, okay, the Bible's not God's word, I'm going to reject it. It really does come down to is just asking the questions, being sure that the burden of proof is where it rightfully belongs, where it should be, on the person making the claim. So if a person is saying that, Jesus' depiction in the book of Mark fulfills prophecy, that's a claim. They have to demonstrate that the claim is true. And you can ask exploratory questions to sort of chip away at the confidence level they have. You can ask things like, okay, Mark says this about Jesus. How do we know Mark wrote Mark? How do we know Mark, the writer of Mark, how do we know this person actually saw Jesus? How do we know that this person might not be just some other person that believed in this and wrote this as a work of, I don't know, a collection of stories or anything like that? Like, get them to examine those questions, just the really, really basic stuff. Get them down to, how do you know X about this book? Usually, how do we know who it was written, or how do we know that what it says is actually true? And you can start kind of going at the base of the belief. Rather, it's more of a bottom-up approach than a top-down approach when it comes to it. Go towards the base of the belief and start generating questions there. Because if you can ask the right question down there and get them to sit there and say, oh, hey, wait a minute, how do I know Matthew wrote Matthew? Or how do I know that John actually, or Luke has actually heard these stories and is accurately repeating them to us? How do I know this? And that could potentially cause a ripple effect that goes up the tree and affects, like a string of dominoes, affects all the stuff that comes after that. Potentially, or maybe not. It could take time. It could take a long time. You might not get any progress. It's when you're ever trying to sway somebody, you might succeed, you might not. But I do want to say last thing before we let you go. On the specific thing about prophecy, because you said your friends are really into the prophecy thing. There's a very good YouTube channel called Deconstruction Zone. It's hosted by a guy named Justin. He's a Old Testament. I think he has like a master's degree in like Old Testament studies, speaks Hebrew. He's extremely knowledgeable about these things. And he makes the active claim that there are no prophecies about the Messiah in the Old Testament that were fulfilled by Jesus. Like, he will make that claim and he will bring the receipts. He will go into the Hebrew and what the Old Testament actually claims, what the Old Testament's context was, what the words mean, what things like the Lord or Israel will eventually do. And then he'll go to the New Testament and go, see, Jesus actually didn't do this because of these various reasons. I absolutely recommend checking out his channel. He streams like once or twice a week. He's a very smart guy. And yeah, I really recommend that when it comes to like the whole prophecy thing, because it's really entertaining to watch. And then also, like I said, look up some street epistemology. Like there's a whole street epistemology Discord server. There are cheat sheets that you can download. And in fact, if you email me, skepticsandscoundrels@gmail.com, I will send you my materials on street epistemology. It'll give you a more structured approach to these conversations, and you can look through it and start coming up with your own conversational style that you might find effective with your friends. It can't hurt. So I recommend doing that.
All right. I appreciate it. You said Deconstruction Zone?
Deconstruction Zone. The guy's name is Justin. You can find him on YouTube. Yeah. Very, very entertaining and very educational. I recommend it.
All right. Thank you very much. Eric, I've only seen you a handful of times on here. Seth, I've seen you back since the Atheist Experience. For both of you guys, it's been wonderful talking to you. And thank you for all this. I never imagined I'd be calling in, but it was almost a surreal experience that I've been listening to this stuff for a while. And here I am feeling like in this shoes with my background that I felt like I should be able to talk to them and I couldn't. So,
well, set expectations, thank you for the kind words, but I'm telling you, set expectations so that you're not carrying the burden of their opinions, their mindset, rescuing them on your shoulders. I think just try to find opportunities, give yourself some grace, ask a lot of questions, and try not to get sucked in to the vortex when they go hard at you with apologetics. If they become a hose beast, there is no reason for you to get trapped in the same trap that they are in. Just pace yourself, do what you can, and keep kicking out there, okay?
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I guess have a good night. May the hose beast not bite.
It's just one of those things. Like, it just takes off. You just never know on a show what I'm going to latch onto, and then literally just beat the dead horse. I've been talking about this thing for the last 2.5 hours, but this is the kind of thing that amuses me, and apparently it amuses the chat, because they've been talking about, like, what are the origins of the hose beast, and what do you feed it? How would it be domesticated?
This could be the next spaghetti monster. I mean, you never know. So
you never know about that. So
yeah. There's it's one of those things when you're dealing, like, we had some good callers tonight. But sometimes when you have a night of just like dumpster fire after dumpster fire arguments, you need something to latch on to anchor your sanity to. And tonight it was Hose Beast.
There was.
Thankfully, we didn't rely too heavily on him because the calls were pretty good. But no, I've had nights where I'm like, man, my brain is just mush at this point. I need something.
There was one thing I wanted to throw out. I think if we had one of the recurring themes I heard tonight was something along the lines of, well, if it makes you happy and it's not true, isn't there some merit to that? And I don't think that's an unfair representation of what we heard. And I was reminded of that George Bernard Shaw quote, which I pulled up and I will read from the fact that a believer is happier than a skeptic is no more to the point than the fact that a drunken man is happier than a sober one. The happiness of credulity is a cheap and dangerous quality of happiness, and by no means a necessity of life. So, I mean, happy is important. We should be pursuing happiness, but I just reject this notion that we have to embrace falsehoods to be happy. There's a real joy. Even in a difficult life, there's a satisfaction, maybe the better word, a satisfaction with pledging ourselves to what is evidence-based, what is tethered to the real world, what is fact and not fiction. I think there's a lot of merit there, and I reject the lie that we have to, embrace the happy fantasy because there are rainbows and all sorts of fanciful things that promise the happy endings that our real world does not. I think gratification, joy, satisfaction, fulfillment, purpose, etc., come in other forms that are more meaningful to us. So anyway, I wanted to leave you with that tonight.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's an excellent quote, and that's the one I remember reading that a long time ago about how religious comfort is likened to a drunkard feeling good from the alcohol. Yeah. It's like, yeah, sure, you feel good in the moment, but you don't know what downstream problems that may cause. I've heard a similar analogy. I think maybe it was from Matt a long time ago. Imagine walking around living your life as if you had $1 million in the bank. This is separate from my analogy earlier, but imagine if you genuinely believed, or rather you chose to believe, if that's such a thing as possible, that you had $1 million in the bank, but you don't actually have the evidence of it, but you think it, and you're living your life as if you had $1 million in the bank. You're spending money, buying cars, and racking up debt, and it feels good in the moment. But once reality finally catches up with you, you're gonna be a lot of hurt. And I think it's a good reason why we should value truth over comfort, because for one, like I said, increases our ability to survive and thrive in this world if we have an accurate understanding of it. And also it helps us to avoid any pitfalls and harm that comes from false beliefs. And it's one of the reasons why I do this. And I think, Seth, you probably do the same thing for the same reasons, is that we want to disabuse people of these false beliefs, of these unsubstantiated beliefs, these beliefs that harm in various ways, either direct or indirect, beliefs that are held without good evidence. And to get rid of that, get it out of your life, and start living your life on life's terms, on reality's terms, because you'll do a lot better and feel a lot better, I think. So,
show announcements.
Yeah, let's do that. I was about to say, I was like, I should have been doing something by now. So we are The Line, and we have multiple shows throughout the week, which I had up and then I got rid of. Let me get back to the chat here. Where is it at? Oh, it's under the After Dark thing now. There it is. Okay. And I should know this by memory, but my brain is mush. I think it might be the effects of the hose beast. It turns your brain into slop. So anyway, we have multiple shows coming up, and we only know who's on for tomorrow, but Sunday shows, you're here to one of them. But on Sunday, we have two shows. One is at noon Central Time, and the other one's at 3 o'clock Central Time.
2 p.m. Central.
2 p.m. Central. I'm getting my time zones mixed up. Anyway, the Sunday show. Then we have Skeptalk on Monday. Then we have Chewed Gum on Tuesday. The Hang Up on Wednesday. Transatlantic Call-In show on Thursday. And then we have a nice little break on Friday and Saturday. But then we wrap back around at the end of the Sunday show. And then I think, who do we have for tomorrow? Armageddon? I think you posted it, but I can't find it. Forrest and Skeptical Heretic. So be sure to tune in tomorrow for that show, folks. I'm sure it's going to be very good. Seth, I think that's it. Any closing comments, or did you already give yours? Or
No. Just a huge thanks to Stephanie, and who is moderating the calls, and Anna Morgan, and everybody else who has been the glue that held Eric and I together. And thanks to everybody for watching and listening. I think we're all, honestly, it's a real honor to be a part of a community like this. And I think this is a great example of how we have used the online space to try to connect with people, to try to connect with ideas, and to show how conversations can be done without turning on each other. And I'd like to see a lot more of that out there. And it's just really nice to be able to have done the show with you, Eric. I really appreciate you and your kind words and your work. And so let's do it again, okay?
Yeah, likewise, Seth. This was a real pleasure, and I hope we can do this again.
Okay.
So, bye, folks. Watch out for that hose beast. He might be lurking anywhere.
I got to tell Natalie about the hose beast, which sounds kind of naughty when I say it that way.
Hey, babe, have you heard about this hose beast thing?
Not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Night.